what I'm basically saying is like a lot of the old tanks, if you look at the Rhine designs and stuff like that, the super dated designs, a lot of the problems I see with counterpicking is actually coming from the Overwatch 1 heroes, and particularly the off tanks I just touched up on, which just don't have an identity in 5v5 as a solo tank.
Yeah, well, no shit, the problems with the Overwatch 1 heroes. They rug pulled half the fucking tank cast. All of the specialist interesting heroes, the ones that are actually really cool, because they're on the fringes of the design space of what you could like push it as far to the side as possible and get that extreme, fun, unique thing, right? What they do for Overwatch 2 is they're like, yoink, back into the middle, yoink, all squishy, you don't get to be interesting anymore. Every fucking tank's a hazard. Yeah. You're a tank that can generally brawl, but also you can put some pressure with a movement cooldown on a space over there. You can stand on main. It's boring. And if all of your solutions are just yoink into the middle, you can say like mobility and resource demand and ability to shoot from range and ability to brawl, and you put all of these into the middle, right? You're like, and then you just have nothing, right? You just they're all in the box, and you can say like the box is still interesting. I agree with you, the box is still interesting for some people, but we have less, right? Less variance. Avril's probably feeling a little bit squeamish now that they've lost all the arguments, I guess. I mean, I know Spilo is pretty much I don't really mind, but I understand all the arguments for 6v6 and I kind of agree with them all. Like angle. Sam is definitely a Dynamo 6v6er. Hawk is a yapper. Spilo's on 5v5 side this time. Interesting. They probably should have got a different guess then, because I doubt Spilo's going to be fully going for the 5v5. He said he likes 5v5 more. Interesting. Spilo undercover agent. The problem with Spilo, right, on these ones is you need an extra person, because Spilo's always in the middle of everything because he understands everyone's argument, right? Yeah, if Jake was on here, it'd be a lot more interesting, but obviously SBB and Spilo's love affair, well, you would get that hair on whenever you could, right? Okay, you guys ready? I think I'm good. Let's go.
We're here for the second great 6v6 debate. It has been, I checked, it was like around 17 months, so like a year and a half since the first 6v6.
The Hawk guy took Ralph's spot. Yeah, well, how does SVB get Hawk on but not me? Out of all the people to get on that are gonna have a relaxed conversation about these things, like SVB seems to like, Kaja, that trim clean. This is 8 days, Kaja, and this is about a week. Thank you very much. How you doing, dude? It's been a while.
This debate took place, and I brought as much of the original squad as I could, one imposter, to assess where we are a year and a half later. So much has changed. 6v6 is a reality once more, in no small part down to the people on this call. So let me introduce my guests, and let's get from...
Damn right down to the people on the call. Like, Sam is the person that caused this to happen. Like, 100%. Like, if Sam was not on the side of 6v6, there's no way this would have ever happened.
Ostensibly the 6v6 side, I don't think it'll be quite as divided as this was last time, but representing the 6v6 side, first of all, in the top right, it's Samito. Sam, what's up?
How's it going, man? Prayers out to everybody in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati dealing with the floods. You know, it's been craziest storms I've ever seen over here.
We are on 1.25 times speed already. Don't worry, guys.
So I hope everybody's safe. But the street that I lived on,
I'm here for you.
like one street under, like I would always walk these parks 10 feet underwater, like crazy, like crazy. So yeah, glad to be back. Glad that 6v6 is back. Yeah.
Yeah, and heart goes out to those people. Stay safe. So I'm sure that's a cause close to your heart, much like this one, Sam. So hopefully it all goes all right. In the bottom left, representing the other half of the 6v6, it's Hawk. Hawk, what's up?
How you guys doing? You know, I know some of you guys have like kind of moved away from Overwatch, done some other games, done some other.
Yeah, it seems loud, right? Sorry, it seems fast, right? The right really says 1.25 times 1.25.
Types of content. I myself kind of like part from Overwatch a little bit, but you know, it feels right to be back for this debate. I don't think I'll get nearly as heated as last time, or as controversial as last time.
Ridiculous.
But yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to kind of reflect and predict the future.
Where's Jake? I want to see Jake.
Yeah, it's been a while, right? We'll get into it in a second about how that debate kind of actually shaped a lot of what came afterwards. But first,
it shaped it in a really bad way. And also, like, we went through this entire thing of this debate happening, and neither Sam nor Hawk nor anyone apart from me was even willing to address the the arguments against it. Nobody still banned each other's positions. Everyone just argued their own one. And I'm here like, well, okay, well, counter swapping is a similar kind of like side grade to teams hating on certain characters and that sort of stuff, and being able to stack the wrong teams. Like, these are kind of like similar issues, and we should compare them together. And kind of like going off on your own and having that space in 5v5 is side graded by the fact that in 6v6 most low ranked players don't want to have that space. They just want to be non-oppressed by like deep angles. Like, there's a load of different things, and obviously Q times. I address Q times. Nobody else addresses Q times. Nobody else but me was willing to say Q times will be fine in 6v6, and they are fine in 6v6. Remember to not get too mad at Avril. He might appear and call you a twat again. Okay, I'm gonna message him at some point and see if I can mend the bridge, because he'd be a nice nice, interesting guy to talk to because he has some weird takes, man. Like weird takes. Idiot or bad faith. There you go. That is his definition. Met Avril in Stockholm last year. He only knew me for the drama shit I did. You're like, hey, I'm that guy on the internet, and Avril was like, what? The asshole on the internet? Avril doesn't like me either. Does Avril like anyone, man?
Person to duel it out with them and did a great job last time. And he said he's prepared for potentially more 6v6 hate comments coming his way this time. In the top left, it's Avril. Avril, what's up?
I feel bad, man. Like Sam came out with this awesome heartfelt comment to Kentucky. Meanwhile, I had this whole gag planned, and now I feel bad for it. But it's planned, so I'm gonna do it. And what
Go
it
for
is if you notice, we're gonna get the spot where he's got a gag himself behind him in the green screen. And as a group up semi-regular, you know me from my backgrounds. I think the last time I was here, I didn't room set up, right? So I was on green screen. Well, I gotta do a throwback. I gotta do a big ass throwback. You thought, just for the old, the ones that were here for the previous,
down the
you know
green
what it is,
screen.
guys. Come on, you know what it is. We gotta get back in there.
Oh boy,
Just
what's
for
he
old
gonna
time's
Throwing it
sake.
back, guys. Avril's
What's he
throwing it
gonna
back.
He's throwing it back.
I didn't have.
Anyway.
This gag was okay.
Yeah, there it is. Bring it back. Bring it back.
So for those obviously
The
listening
house,
on
you know
audio, he
Wait, I'm still
briefly
there.
he briefly lifted his green screen up to show the "I'm done" thumbnail
Oh
from
gosh.
Samito.
Yeah,
Dude, that was
it's a
a
throwback to
siren
the first
cook
debate.
on that one. That was one of the best thumbnails that he's ever made.
What's-
That was a banger.
The best part is I'm ready. I said
Shall we
this
skip the intros, guys? Like we all know who these people are. His opening thoughts as well, which is sometimes you skip good stuff
before
in
we
here.
got started. Sam was like, I'm ready for all this Amino viewer hate for like a year after the debate as I got last time. The funny thing is the amount of people that thought that me using that thumbnail last time was proof that I hated you, or like we like had beef behind the scenes was so funny.
It's almost good for the show because it's
Yeah, I
whatever,
know.
people just love drama so much and they'll try to make it wherever they can. It's just
Yeah.
funny. It's just
And
funny.
I said to you, like, even AI, Brock says that you and I, that Avril Samito beef is one of the biggest beefs in Overwatch 1. This is it's just so funny. It's so
It actually is
laughable.
funny. We actually might have to coin that at this point. We'll have to coin it and make it an official
Start the
meme.
beef. Just start it on Twitter.
Start the beef.
Hawk's a diva player for SSG.
Yeah,
It's the
I
duality
assume you know what SSG is. So.
of the internet because it's like on the one hand, sometimes we'll have an episode and we're like,
I think it's
in
still with
agreement. We're like,
SSG.
yeah, this is good, this is bad, and people are like, this ain't a debate. Why you call it a debate? These guys agreeing, and then when you guys do debate something, they're like, well, they must hate each other.
He's
They
their
must-
sub. Rest in peace.
They're sworn enemies.
You can never win. It's so
All right, well,
Tank player that had terrible takes in the pro Discord. I feel like it's probably Hawk, given that Hawk's outspoken about this as well. He's probably outspoken about everything in his life.
since it is a debate, we still have another representative from the 5v5 side, of course. This time we couldn't have Jake with us. Jake, who was a great active participant in the controversy, in the long discussions, in the back and forths. But unfortunately, he's been busy this time, so love goes out to Jake.
He's busy and he doesn't want to touch it with a fucking barge pole because he's lost. He lost the debate. He's a loser.
In his stead, an able replacement in the bottom right, Spilo. Spilo, talk us through your background, which not all the viewers will be able to see.
So people have always made fun of me for riding the fence with 5v5 and 6v6.
Yeah.
Trying to provide nuanced
Yeah.
opinion, not
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
let people make up their own minds. I
Yeah,
got
yeah,
a real
yeah.
DM though that says publicly announced support for 6v6. So that's going to be our background for today. The question is am I going to cave to the IRA or am I going to
Literally a Ralph reference.
go in another direction? I'll find out what this is. So glad to be here. How many of you guys saw the Jake versus Iron 5v5 6v6 debate last year?
I did,
Yeah, it was depressing.
I hope it goes better than that. That's the first debate on that
No,
topic.
no, it wasn't. It didn't go bad. Iron was just like a 10 on the emotion scale.
I clicked off after 15 minutes.
I didn't
I
even
watched it all. It was great. It was great.
bother clicking it
It
because
was
I knew
awful.
exactly what it was going to be.
It was
I knew it was going to
awful.
be. I knew it
It
was.
was
gonna be.
immovable
Yeah, I-
force versus unstoppable, or unstoppable force versus immovable.
Yeah, and they weren't even understanding each other's points was the worst part. Like, I wanted Jake to actually address some of the points that he had, but he didn't have any points. He just had... No, they weren't even talking about the same topic most of the
Neither
time.
one of them will like
The worst
concede
part
any.
of it.
Worst
Yeah.
debate I have ever listened to in my entire life.
No, peak iron crash outs are truly.
Iron was like, I was like, oh my gosh, he's gonna punch the screen. Like
That was-
and Jake just sits there, smirking. Like,
Yeah, Jake won by doing nothing during that debate.
But Jake
Jake would stun lock
loved
him. Jake likes to stun lock. Like Jake would stun lock Iron, and Iron would not be able to take the stun. Like he'd just
And
succeed.
I would short circuit, and to give Jake a lot of credit too. Like, and I know he gets this too, and I know you guys do, but the people at home, like you all might not. Spilo, we've talked about this quite a bit. There's this different, like the culture difference between pro players and like content creators and casual players is so polarizing. You all would not believe.
Yeah, because pro players are all children that are good at a sport. Have you ever seen children that are good at a sport? They're normally arseholes.
So to get a bit of a taste of that, Jake's like what makes him so good is that he's so good at walking both because he had to live both, and so like he can go into that environment and like just crack a smile at any time because he knows what's coming. Just so funny. I thought it was good for comedy, Spilo. It was good for comedy.
it was really funny. But yeah,
Like he's just a good speaker. Like he could just gap most people in speaking ability. So
Truly,
Yeah,
truly
I
you
would-
come here. You got to come to group up for the superior 6v6 versus 5v5 discussion, right? That's where it actually belongs.
Yeah, I confess
for
my job's gonna
mechanics.
be a lot easier without Jake here, because half of my job in the last one was just cutting Jake off, being like, Jake, I'm sorry,
By
but
the way,
I'm gonna let you finish, but
and I don't want to. This is hot. This is tough. I like my buddy Jake, but I do got to say this: the amount of people they're like, "Oh man, Avril keeps cutting Samir off." I'm like, dude, that's Jake. Jake's cutting Sam off. I let Sam talk. What are we talking about? People coming after me for that, blaming me for Jake. That's crazy.
that was-
Yeah, no, he's right there. He's right. Yeah, Jake's so passionate, and it's so weird that he just doesn't see the argument, because he's clearly, like, his brain's clearly working fast. And I do not like the trouble is he never. It's the trouble with Sam and I. And they don't actually have good arguments for the most part. They have okay-ish arguments, but they don't address any of the downsides of their position, and therefore they don't address the downsides of the opponent's position in a meaningful way. To be honest, yeah, I did cut Avril off. Peggy, she is there, and she's beautiful. Yes, she's beautiful.
Honestly,
Just
I'm
sleeping
excited to follow that one out, because I think that was one of the most like idea clashing, like, hack and slash until we get to the bread and butter that that we've ever had. It was a good show, to be honest. So I'm excited to follow up. Actually, I have some hot takes, SVP. I've changed my mind on some
I'm
things.
sure.
I didn't think I was going to. So.
It wouldn't be an episode of the podcast, but at least a few hot
Are you
takes,
wrong?
especially when we get Avril and Sam and Spilo all in here as well. Do love dropping actually Spilo usually keeps it nuanced, at least on this podcast, but Avril loves to throw out like break glass
Yeah,
moments.
nuance. Yeah, he keeps it nuance. All right. Yeah.
Sam always breaks off into something at some point, especially with the earthy metaphors.
Yeah,
I was
so
gonna,
one's coming nowhere.
I was gonna say on the note of what you just said, actually, not to like toot the horn of this podcast, because I have no hubris about what the podcast does or doesn't do, but I do think the first 66 debate had a massive impact in a way that I never thought it would
Yep.
on
Of
the
course it did.
ecosystem of Overwatch's format. I don't think any.
Guys, do you know why the first 6v6 debate had a massive impact? Because the 6v6ers were right. And nobody knew why at the time, and nobody knew why they weren't happy, but the casual players that watched that knew it was correct. Because it was correct. It's very easy to argue your point when you're actually right.
Anyone did, yeah. I don't think anyone anticipated, just to set the scene for anyone who maybe doesn't remember or didn't listen to the original 66 call. Like when we had it, it was 66 was just an idea floating around, right? It was just like people were like, maybe we should go back to 6v6. Like maybe it was better. It was just
Yeah, from the moment that they announced 5v5, I was saying it.
like a movement that was starting to emerge, but it wasn't. It was in no way. I don't think any of us conceived that it would ever return in any form back to Overwatch at that time. But I think the debate went so well. You and Sam, and Sam and Hawk, you guys did such a great job, I think, of advocating for the 66 side. I think a lot of people came away being like, you know what, these guys are saying something worth listening to. Like this, there's something here. And I think Avril and Jake did a great job of pushing back and giving the 5v5 side to the point where I do genuinely think the developers were like, you know what, maybe we should look at this. So how do I'll take it to Sam and Hawk.
I don't think Iron did a great job, but I think Sam probably did it.
On that note, before we kind of actually
So
get
funny.
talking about how you guys feel and the whole actual substance of the matter, how do you reflect on that? Like, where were you then, and how do you feel now on the fact that 6v6 is in the game now as a playable mode? I'll take it to Hawk first. Hello guys, SCB here, and the Group Up podcast is content that 50% says or detailed analysis much more frequently, and where a lot of my attention will go be.
Sam's best argument is probably just the gameplay loop for tank stuff, he says. I forgot what it was like to actually angle as a tank. It breathed life back into my soul. Yeah, just being able to off-angle. Like, when you're a solo tank, you're on main by definition. When you're not a solo tank, you can actually off-angle. Like, it's
Beyond just
crazy.
Overwatch. It would mean the absolute world to me if you guys would check it out. But that's it for now. Let's head back to the discussion.
Yeah, it was like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago at this point, and I remember we were talking about.
Yeah, I love how his hair in the recorded sign up to my Patreon clip is actually fully silver, and in this he's grown out his roots now.
The debate, like we didn't really know like how people would perceive it. People might have just thought we were like crazy when we started this debate, but then as the guys got published, we started like reading the comments like, wow, like people actually like kind of agree with us. Like we thought we might just be like looked at as like lunatics, but as after the debate, it kind of like took a lot of steam, and like some of us like it got pretty heated, but I was always kind of copium, like.
And to be clear, I actually think the last 6v6 debate with these guys was actually a bit of a clusterfuck. They didn't really solve anything. They didn't really get to any arguments. They didn't have good arguments on either side. Hopefully by now people's arguments have developed to the point where they're actually willing to address some of the things like queue times, like space on the map, like the actual tank gameplay loop. Like all of these things need to be addressed, like counter swapping versus losing due to your tank combination, stuff like that. All of these things need to be addressed in a one side versus the other side kind of way, so you can actually see that. I think it does play out really well in terms of the 6v6 direction. And then at the end of the day, 5v5 is a format that's had an entire format swap for the entire fucking video game to make it work. It's had an entire extra system put on top of it in terms of the perks after years of trying to make it work in order to actually get it to the point where it is now. And 6v6, they just roll up, they shove the heroes in a map, and it works pretty well. Right? They just shove heroes on the map, and it works better than the 5v5, I would say. And that's just insane to me.
Hopefully it would come back in some way. I made a lot of predictions about the end of that, like a classic and like a lot of like features of Overwatch 1 probably are gonna come back. But yeah, I thought I was always hopeful, but it was like a pretty like controversial thing at the time that I didn't think people would resonate with so much.
Yeah, I think it took us all by surprise. And Sam, I don't think if you had said, if
Some
any
of
of us had
that
said at that call, like, oh, you know, it's 18 months from now, they're going to release a playable version of 6v6, multiple playable versions of 6v6 in the real game, like, I would have said, no.
I'll do 6v6 until the 5v5s go away. Don't get me wrong, we've won, but there's more ground to win. There's plenty more ground to win until they have no arguments left that haven't been addressed. The reason why I'm still interested in talking about it is because I feel like 3/4 of the conversation hasn't happened at this point. That's the only reason why I'm so interested. If I felt like it had actually been passed out in a way where we're just repeating the same thing and it's the same arguments, I would be so bored right now. But I'm going to be honest, this guy and this guy ain't done good enough. I can do better. I'd love to be on here, but unfortunately, it is what it is. We're just going to have to deal with it and yell into the void until we do get there.
No, there's no way. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, you have to give them credit too, because I think they found.
Yeah, we haven't run one until we have rogue queue. 5v5 open queue, 6v6 rogue queue. Yay!
It's a possible way to appease everybody, which is your end goal. You know, like that's what you really want. I mean, I'm really satisfied, to be honest. What I'm really impressed with is the fact they did it with open queue and it's actually good.
And this is what I'd be saying if I was on a podcast like now. We've won, but we've got plenty more to win. And until I address all the arguments and actually knock them down in a way that hasn't happened before, then we won't get to the place where we should be, which is 6v6 roll queue, 5v5 stadium. Yeah, stadium, exactly. And I'm sorry, but we're gonna keep having to have this conversation until people address all the points, and I've systematically broken them down to the point where there is no response to it that is actually cogent.
That's what surprised me the most, and that's what
If they have a new point, I want to hear it. I want to tell them they're wrong in a reasonable way.
I really am excited to talk about today, because Hawk has been trying to push me on this train for I think you have brought this up, dude, since literally 2020. You and I, was it Gator that you guys would always talk about it? Probably like, dude, they should have brought back. They never should got rid of open queue. You've always been on the open queue train.
I've never liked. I mean, I understand why people like Warlock, and I completely understand that. Like, above like a gold to like maybe a little plat level, like you kind of need Warlock for some games, but like. I played an account from Plat.
I think it's a hard one. I think Rollock was a solution aiming for a problem that was caused by the lack of even balance between tanks, DPS, and supports in the variety of heroes, the types that were made, and the variety of gameplay loops available in those heroes. I think that Rollock was trying to solve the fact that the queue times were uneven, when really, if we do go to Rollock, we should have been doing it because we think the gameplay is better. Not just on average, because we can solve those averages through other means. Like, we should have had other ways of trying to address it. I think Rollock was one of those things where it was a band-aid fix while Blizzard made more tanks and evened out the distribution between tank, DPS, and supports, which, by the way, Rivals is currently going through because they didn't learn any of the lessons from Overwatch for some reason. But yeah, like, I just think Rollock was kind of like the wrong reasons to do something, in my opinion.
To GM, from mid-masters to like high champ. One of my other cast plays in champ, finished open queue. Like most of my games have been pretty tame, like comp-wise. Like
I don't care about averages. I don't want to play a single game with less than 2 tanks and 2 supports. Yeah, 100%. Like, is it better to always have a consistent product? Is it better to always have a good quality experience, or is it better to spam out a poor experience? Like, is there a way for you to get the poor experience to be more averagely a better product? That's a question. And I feel like that's kind of what Rivals has done. The way that Rivals has got to the point where they're able to have open queue is by making the product poorer, by generalizing so many of the heroes and making the ult so much more of a focus of the game. Whereas if you actually make the average gameplay loop of the game better, it won't support open queue in exactly the same way. I am very much a 2-2-2 person, by the way. I don't think the game should, I don't think the competitive game should exist without it. I don't think I'm
losing off loading screen. I'm not seeing those like 5 DPS comps that everyone like talked about. That does probably happen in quick play a bunch.
Because everyone's playing tank. Somebody say it. Everyone's playing tank. Because everyone always wanted to play tank. Because tank only wasn't popular because we went through a year of double shield. And before that, a year of goats. It's like, come on, guys. Like, what are we talking about? You only had 8 tanks on Overwatch 1's demise, and 2 of them were Orisa and Sigma, which were boring as hell, and Bull was hard to learn. And then you got these like 5 core tanks that are just like, oh, and Roadhog was obviously Roadhog. And then you got those 4 core tanks that were actually the tanks in the game. And now they've expanded those 4 core tanks into like 10 tanks, and now we actually have a variety of different things we can play, so people are wanting to play the role, because the only reason people didn't want to play the role wasn't because people don't want to play tank in World of Warcraft. It was literally just because there were less tanks available and less variety of gameplay available for them.
But like,
what's the implementation of it right now? What is the implementation? Is it like max? Like, what is the format that they have?
It's max
right
3.
now?
It's only 2 tanks. You can't pick 3 tanks, but you can pick 3 supports.
But it's max 3 everything else.
Yes.
No, you can go
No,
anything.
no, no,
You,
no max.
you
I
can
don't
go.
think.
You can go 40 PS, 5. You can go 60 PS if you really like.
But you
I
can't
haven't
pick
seen
three
it.
tanks.
Yeah, you can't pick 3 tanks. You can pick only. Yeah, but you can pick 6 supports. You pick 60 PS. You can't pick 3 tanks.
It's interesting, and I guess to wrap it up, also don't let him sell himself short. The dude's already freaking.
No, I agree. The early role queue splitting did a lot of damage to the Overwatch community in general. Like, you don't destroy those communities over time. What people don't realize is that a community for a certain type of thing is not instantly there. Right, is instantly there if it's very outwardly appealing. But tank has never been and never will be outwardly appealing, so the tank player base has to be built brick by brick over time with a consistent experience, and that's why it took so long to dismantle the tank player base, because the tanks were there and they were willing to play, and then it just dipped because the experience was bad over a long period of time because there were no new players coming into it.
Freaking rank 1 open queue ladder. It's great, and I think that especially with Perk Watch too, I think that was, I don't want to say like Overwatch's darkest time, but that was a time where they really needed to like respond, and that was about the best response they could have.
Oh yeah, limiting tanks to 2 when every bad meta was full of supports is a complete misunderstanding. Yeah, no, 100%. Like, it's a complete misunderstanding of the game. What are you doing? I guess they're not limited. Like, why are they limiting the tanks? Because they have purposely made the tanks better and bigger than they were in the 6v6 222 lock days, individually, in terms of their health bars, in terms of the amount of stuff they can do, in terms of the amount of space control. And they've done this on purpose because they were concerned that people didn't want to play tank, or people switching from 5v5 to 6v6 would die faster and therefore would complain more about tank and play tank less. They made a lot of choices that made tanks a lot bigger, so that's why I feel like they've locked tanks to 2 in general. But realistically, the actual problem for the entire history of Overwatch has been support levels, Blizzard's lack of understanding on how to balance support levels, the lack of understanding on how different types of things combine on top of each other, like basically just like low levels of AoE healing combined into a low undercurrent of being able to be okay with like 35 to 40 healing per second average for everyone.
I think a lot of those things could have been PvE abilities that they brought in. It really actually is like Perk Watch really is Overwatch 2. It's the first time that I can honestly say like, yo, like this is an iteration, you know. And actually,
I love perks.
hot take. I'm not sold on it. Like, I still have to think about this more, but I think that perks are actually a better version of team ups in Rivals. I think that like they're actually a better version.
Yeah, team ups are terrible, just absolutely terrible. Like, team ups are really bad. It's interesting that they're getting here just before my video releases as well, where I have an entire 20-minute section to start with about team ups. I think 2 tanks, 4 supports is actually viable. Of course it's viable. I mean, they just increased the power of supports to be able to duel people in 5v5 and never brought the power back down to a reasonable degree. The supports are just big DPS that can support as well. Like, that's just all they are. Yeah. Of course it's viable. The question is whether it's actually interesting to play against, and should we allow people to play that if it's boring, right? Like, all these bad games we get from open queue are the counter offer to having the queue times necessarily, though, as I say, we can fix the queue times in different ways.
Did you say that?
On Frito show.
Oh, you did. You're right. You're right. No, you're right. You did. Yeah, and I think you're actually right, because they're not conditional. You know, like they're more like you get. Like, obviously, like, there's still synergies and stuff like that are really fun, but I think the ability to get that out on your own and be able to cut. SPB, you brought something like that up like a year and a half ago about like customizing. And I actually think that this was a really good implementation. So it's nice to give them props on a lot of this stuff. I'm sad that it took this long as somebody who likes 6v6, but I'm not like mad about it at all. Like, I'm just grateful that it's back.
I don't think the perks are a good addition to the game. I've already kind of said when we were talking about the director's take that I didn't think they were a good addition. The only reason to pick a DPS over a support is the more consistent burst damage to burn through support stacking. No, that's not the only reason. You say consistent burst damage, what you mean is sharp, lethal damage that is non-telegraphed for the person receiving it, and because they have that the sharp lethal damage, they are a better conduit for certain types of support resources in order to put out a disproportionate amount of pressure onto certain people, right? The reason DPS are much better being healed by a support than a support is being healed by a support. That's why you play DPS, right? That's kind of the idea, right? DPS passive, get out of the game. Just get out of the game. I don't want to hear about the DPS passive. No, we're not doing that. Get the health pools down to 200. Remove the DPS passive.
No, a couple of my buddies
instantly
back on,
improve the game.
Playing a little bit again, talking about it. So yeah, no, honestly, I'm happy. There's no reason to be bitter or anything. Like, we have 66 back, and it's got
there is reason to be bitter, Sam. There's always more to fight for.
Really good coat of paint on it. I don't even know. It's not even paint. Like the whole
all of the band-aids you've done for the 5v5 format over the last 3 years. Can we just get them gone, please? Like, just all of those things that are stacked up on top of each other. Just away. Just get rid of them, please. Jesus
Nation
Christ.
up, you know, with Perk Watch. I think it's great. So
I'm not it's not my fault, Sanyu. It's genuinely not my fault. I do not try and have controversial opinions. I just happen to disagree with everyone by pure coincidence. I do not try to do this. It's not fun having the wrong opinion all the time as opposed to the public opinion. It's fun when I get proved right eventually because I'm always correct about everything that I ever say. But it's not fun when I have to disagree with people and they think I'm an asshole because they think I'm just being controversial.
I'm just feeling kind of grateful that it's there and just satisfying, I guess.
Yeah, I think it really demonstrates that the dev team has diverse thoughts, right? It's like it's not homogenous. The same way that we have different ideas where we're like, oh, like I want customizability. Avril wants something else. He thinks like let's destroy tanks.
What's larger, Ralph's ego or Spylo's hair? I own it when I'm wrong. I 100% own it when I'm wrong. I have owned it when I'm wrong about multiple things. Do you know what the Miss Fantastic thing? I was wrong about that in Marvel Rivals, making a type of goats meta. I didn't realize that Marvel Rivals was so vapid that all of the neutral gameplay didn't matter at all. That's my bad. I didn't realize that it was that bad. I didn't realize that not having a good enough ultimate just invalidated him as a character in general, so everything else didn't matter, right? I didn't realize that. Sorry, guys. I didn't realize there was no neutral that mattered.
All together, you guys might want 626, you guys might want open queue. Like, we all have like these things, and I think the dev team works the same way, where there's like someone advocating for something, and it's just a matter of like, well, when they have these team meetings, where eventually does it land that they're like, you know what, let's give this a shot. So we'll get to discussing in a sec. I'll quickly touch base with Avril, and then we'll take it to Spylo. Avril, your reflections actually since the last call. How do you feel having seen
Yeah, I have no problems with not back passive, to be clear.
all this go down?
I think that might be like my most famous content thing I've been a part of ever, because everyone always brings it up still to this day, all the time. People always bring it. If it's some person that will like maybe show up in my chat and my stream for the first time.
Yeah, because it was you literally just being wrong.
Or like someone I'll interact with that's like maybe a little bit outside of my normal circle of like, fans interaction, whatever. It probably will be at least somewhat connected to like, oh yeah, I remember you on the 55626 debate, or if it's coming from a place where they just like really dislike me, it's probably from there as well. So like, I probably Jake probably did as well. Maybe a bunch of us did from different angles, but yeah, there were definitely wasn't fun dealing with some of the negativity surrounding that debate. But at the same time, the only things I probably regret from that debate is, despite it being extremely good for content, admittedly the kind of like combativeness of that debate was probably really good for the actual content itself. So what Hawk was touching on.
Nah, it's fine to be combative. I just hate when people don't actually address each other's arguments. Combative and good argument are not mutually exclusive. They just had bad arguments. It was good that they were passionate. I think it really brought a lot of highlight to the issue that they were so passionate. But yeah,
Up on earlier in terms of like how heated it got. I don't think it ever got heated to the point where like we all walked away from that disliking each other. I think we also walked away from that being really friendly. I mean, like, as I said,
well, you saw 10 seconds of me criticizing you about something you genuinely did say, and you don't like me anymore, so meh.
like, it's really funny that people think Sam and I have some massive beef behind the scenes, even though despite the fact that after that debate, Sam and I go on to have multiple different podcasts and content things together.
By the way, Avril, if you ever see this, I actually don't dislike you. You have good takes about quite a lot of things apart from this, and I'd love to have a chat with you. That'd be nice.
Sam all the time behind the scenes and DMs after that, and we're always super friendly and we get on super well.
If you remove DPS passive, would you nerf supports? Because those suckers will full stack without anti-healing. Yes, Kiri's healing per second goes down to 55. Juno's healing per second goes down to 52.
But
there you go.
That debate probably was a little more combative than even I probably wanted to have it going in. It just kind of evolved that way. My regret was probably that I was probably a little too dismissive towards the 6v6 side. But, I think behind the scenes, it's always a situation where I still end up telling people this all the time. Anyone that, especially when the people that really dislike my side that I took on that debate, because I think the 6v6 side has like more fervent people backing it, and the 5v5 is more of the status quo, so they're like less.
Yeah, you're the authority, right? You're the man we're speaking to, right? You're the ones in power, because you have Jake and you have Avril, who are both Blizzard employees at other times, and you're officially in the sphere. The rest of the players, the rest of the people actually championing 6v6 are the people that play the video game, right? The people that don't play the video game, they're like, I love 5v5. And the people that have a incentive to agree with Blizzard also said it. I think that's coincidental, but still, like, they seem to, yeah. Barely a Blizzard employee? Yeah, but he's definitely one of the people with more power in the sphere, wouldn't you say? Like, obviously he is. He's a very popular guy. He's had a massive lot of influence. Someone being that influential on that side means that people feel like they're talking to power, and therefore the people that disagree with them are more likely to be outspoken, and therefore more likely to go harassing on his streams. I think it's fairly... Obviously, I don't think any harassment or anything like that on streams is reasonable, but I understand why it's happening, right?
Willing to say much about it because I don't really need to, because that's the default game mode. Yeah, people will bring it up, and I have to, part of my defense always ends up being like, I could have defended either side. I'm a lot more neutral than people probably.
No, you're not. No, you're not. Because I had a very lukewarm take about your... It was his take about tanks should be... He said Reinhardt and Winston are boring. That was a take that I disagreed with. He said Reinhardt and Winston are boring characters because they're the old design of characters. I said they're the only thing worth having, right? They're the only interesting thing because they have simple kits and the kits interact in a complicated way with other characters. And that was basically my disagreement, right? And yeah, he kind of took it, and it was like, he wasn't very happy. He popped up in the stream for 30 seconds and left. It was sad. It was sad because that's such a upsetting way to like lose a potential friendship with someone. Hazard did boring, Ryan Winston goated? Yeah, he was saying how Hazard is such an interesting kit because it has so many things on top of it. And I was there like, what are you talking about? I don't understand you. And that's basically what I said. I said I don't understand. He said I was being disingenuous, which is sad.
Probably think I am. People think I'm like way more hardcore binary 5v5. We don't really live in that level of binary world. I think people think too binary in terms of like, you're either black or white in terms of your thinking style.
Am I not, is 6v6 black or white? Please pick your poison, guys.
This or that, and there's no gray zone in the middle. Whereas for me, I might lean 5v5 as a preference, but I still like both. I could have argued for both. On that specific debate, SVB could have put me on either team, and I could have successfully argued both ways because I can see the pros and cons, the benefits of either format. Which is why, like...
I would love Avril to tell me the pros for 6v6. That'd be interesting. And I'll tell him the pros for 5v5. And we can have a meeting of the minds. And I can be the 5v5 side. He can be on the 6v6 side. I'd love that. That'd be great.
I'm not, like, fuming that 6v6 is back.
What pros of 5v5? Some people like having more access to free space. Queue times are obviously one of the pros that people bring up quite a bit. 1 sec. Sorry, light moving. What are the pros there that people bring up? I think that's basically it, isn't it? It's just space and queue times, isn't it? Right? More agency? I think that's a result of space, though, isn't it? Really do love Avril. He's so good at saying the pot. He's interesting to watch. Anyway,
I think that's a good thing.
I think just liking big tanks, yeah.
Who want to play 6v6 should be allowed to play 6v6. I think it's great. So yeah, props to the dev team for being able to handle that, because part of my issue was I didn't know if the devs were going to be able to juggle both 5v5 and 6v6 at the same time, because I think it's
they're not juggling it particularly well right now because they're working on Stadium, but you know,
a lot to handle. So the fact that they decided, no, we can do that is it's a great move on their part. So I'm happy with that. But as far as to wrap up,
it's a Blizzard way. Hey guys, we're making something else, so that's why we're neglecting the game we currently have. And then they make that new thing, and they're like, hey guys, we're neglecting that thing we made because we're making something else. And then like we just roll on one point at a time, right? Every single thing is being neglected because they're making something new every single time. Oh yeah, you can't have good enough balance for 6v6 2-2 queue because we're making Overwatch 2. Oh well, you're not getting PvE, but you know what? You're gonna have this 5v5, but you like the 5v5 is gonna be neglected because we're making this new thing. Like it's just this rolling.
Conclude that thought is like, yeah, it was a pretty probably all of us. That debate ended up being a lot more impactful than
5v5 is better because collegiate teams only have 5 PCs available at a time. Oh yeah, so SK they're like Valorant, therefore they only have 5 PCs. Getting them to get a new PC is unreasonable. It's like, what a weird take.
I never thought it was going to be.
I think the 6v6 debate became so popular. First off, because it was the content creator for Blizzard that were on the 5v5 side, and that is obvious. I think everyone can say that is obvious. Any content creator for Blizzard was in favor of the status quo, and therefore people felt that they were talking to power. And second off, I think the average casual player intuitively understands in some way, shape, or form that the 6v6 format is better. When they play it, they kind of get a feeling. And I have so much evidence from every single Reddit thread that happened when the format went live that is just true.
But made for good content, I'll tell you that.
Oh, other 5v5 argument that there is more design space in 5v5 potentially in order to design things. I think that's actually the opposite of what's true, but I think that's something they'll see. That's the trouble. I'd have to steal mana position in order to counter argue to it.
Yeah.
No,
less stress on server, more stress on players. Yeah, less stress on server. Let's make more interesting ultimates. Oh shit, we got a Juno beam and a Malga cage and a Life Weaver tree. Oh, the server loads back to where it was. More stress on players. Yeah, I think more stress on players is another result of space, right?
This is one of the things where, as a host, it can be tricky for me to find the right guest because I need someone who's going to like convincingly give a certain opinion. You don't want a bunch of like, sometimes it's good to have someone who's going to be a bit more in the middle, but you kind of want people to give an opinion, express an opinion. It's one of the reasons I value you, Avril, and you too, Spilo. I think you're both very good at removing your own personal interest from the thing you're discussing and saying, well, this is what I think on par, on evidence, this is what this is and this what this isn't. So
decide that sitting on the fence and having an objective opinion about both was the same thing as giving your personal opinion. I think giving your personal opinion tends to be less even in general, right? Doesn't it? Like, if I give my personal opinion on the take, I say 5v5 terrible, 6v6 amazing. There is no nuance here. Piss off, right? That's my personal opinion, quite frankly. If I was giving a balanced opinion, I'd put in all the arguments there. But he's talking about the personal opinion of the character, the people being balanced. I don't know if that's necessarily true. If Spilo does say he likes 5v5 more later, that's a personal opinion, but that lacks a nuance, right? It's a weird one. I think SVB in general likes the nuanced opinions. I don't think I necessarily do. I like people to argue fervently as to one side and the other side, and thus decide what's actually better based on the strength of the arguments.
I think that's where perhaps the art of the debate is lost, because, you know, I know we kind of live in a very politicized, polarized environment. Wanting to budge on an issue like that, where it's like something fundamental to your life, I think when it comes to like whether Overwatch should be 5v5 6, like it couldn't be lower stakes than that. It's like, it's just a fucking game and you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So like people just
It's always such a weird comment that it's low stakes as the format of the game all of these people have spent a significant part of their life talking about and making content for. Like, that's a weird... Of all the people that argue that 5v5 versus 6v6 is low stakes, I wouldn't think SCB would be the one of them.
debating and like exchanging ideas, I think, is a perfectly great thing to do when it's something like this, which is like, it's truly an opinion. Like, there's no empiricism here, there's no real world consequences. Just like, how do you like to play this?
Empiricism is definitely here. Like, I feel like we have empiricism by walking through the arguments from base level. Like, I feel like we have empiricism.
Video game. So, Spilo, I'll take it to you. Do you have any reflections? And other than that, I'm gonna ask you to kind of give your. Actually, you can do both. You can go in a long one, because I know you've been a bit patient and quiet for a while, and maybe you're being gagged by the 66 IRA behind you. But firstly, any reflections from someone who wasn't part of the debate? If you have anything to chime in on just how the evolution of the 5v5 thing has happened, and then if you want to summarize, I'm gonna ask everyone to summarize their positions right now and like how they feel about like the format of Overwatch. Like, where do you stand?
Sure. I think the big danger with the big impact, for both better or for worse, of the 5v5 debate was, like, I agree that, as you guys have said, that it was a little bit more heated than probably needed to, but
No.
I don't think it was so much like a personal thing. I think like
No, it's fine to be heated. Just have good arguments. That's all I ask.
you guys have already clarified that there was really anything personal. For me, I think like there's more of a responsibility of like how the community extrapolates those opinions, right? And that's exactly what Avril was talking about. Like, Avril and Samito, they want to kill each other, right? Like that's kind of like that's kind of like the main, not danger, because like, let's be honest.
I don't remember all the way back then, obviously, exactly, but I feel like Avril was kind of rude in a couple of scenarios towards Sam. Maybe I'm just conflating Frito with Avril there, but it's been a long time since I watched that, and maybe that's why, because I feel like I came away from that discussion with an opinion that Avril was a little bit poor in terms of addressing. Like, I don't feel like either of them. I feel like they were shits passing in the night in terms of arguments, regardless. But I feel like Avril was definitely not addressing anything that he said on purpose.
Anybody can misconstrue anything that you say on the internet at any point in time and take it and run with it. But I think it's important when we're talking about like nuance and being respectful as much as you can. I'm not going to hurt Avril's feelings. I'm not going to hurt Ox's feelings. I'm not going to hurt Samito's feelings.
You have to have the substance behind the nuance. Yeah, definitely. I agree with
I'm
you.
not going to hurt your feelings, SVB. I've known you guys for years. But someone is going to take something that I'm going to say and run with it in the opposite direction. So
I will.
I'm going to try to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to walk any fences unless I really truly don't have an answer. But obviously how we say it, because I think everybody in this call knows that like it got really political.
I just love how I have bullied Spilo into addressing the fence-sitting argument just by calling him out. I feel like at some point he's watched some of the stuff that I've made on him, and he's been like, okay, fair enough, a couple of times. That's the only reason why he's probably bringing it up.
Right, like especially right after that debate, the 6 months to the year afterwards, like it was to the point where like people were really emotional and upset, and to the point where things were getting pretty ugly. And I think like that's kind of like where we have to be careful. You can't really be held responsible completely for your community, but you can set a good example by the things that you say, and like that's something that I'm trying to do a better job of myself.
Yes, so. and there's always a purity test on the former communities. There's only so much you can do, but there is obviously an unreasonable amount of lack of care as to the things you put out into the public and the tone you take, and that's a gradient scale, and you can't really quantify it. So it's one of those discussions where it's horribly messy, and you have to take it case by case on how people have been to their community, right? You can send people to send death threats to people without ever saying anything, right? If you wanted to organize your tone in a certain way to get people to do that, it's pretty obvious that you can. But yeah, there's some responsibility. Very hard to place exactly where that is.
Now, where I sit with 6v6 and 5v5, I think I have certain opinions.
Urging his community to get on the podcast. I don't think you guys have ever been ever been beyond the pale that I've seen. I don't think ever. You troll people, and I fully endorse you trolling people. But yeah, like I feel like people are quite respectful of me in order to not ruin my relationships with people before it happens. I've never seen anyone whose opinion on me has been changed by the fact that you've gone to them before I've been there
about certain things. I think as a support player, 5v5 is infinitely more interesting. You have more
Ooh, I don't think that's true in any way.
space to make plays. You have more space to position yourself. You have more autonomy with how you can position and things that you do. I think more support comps are viable because you have a less of a demand for healing. There's still the solo tank format, which definitely puts a lot of emphasis off of that solo tank, and any angle that the solo tank occupies is obviously a very difficult angle to clear. I think that's objectively true. I think as a main tank, engage tank, I'm kind of indifferent. I think engage tank in 5v5 or 66, and by engage, I think main, Ryan, Winston, whatever, is always uncomfortable. You're always the center of attention. There's a couple of reasons why that may be. Some of those are armor, a couple of other things maybe we'll talk about later. I think for DPS, it's 50-50. I think.
Okay, so we'll take it bit by bit. Spilo is, as far as I can say, very wrong on the support argument. Okay, like I just disagree fundamentally with that. In 5v5, the heal bot style of support is an invalid style of support. I'm going to say, if you are in silver and you heal bot on the majority of these characters without doing anything aggressive in 5v5, you will lose the video game. In 6v6, especially with the lower health pools, you can win the video game by having a passive playstyle. Being able to have a more active playstyle and more heroes at the expense of not being able to have a passive playstyle is not an increase in diversity of the types of things you can have. It's a reduction in it. Right, just having more space, because in 6v6 you do have that space to be able to do this stuff on the support heroes. You do have that capability to be able to take these angles. You just need to pick the types of supports that are able to do that. And I think what's essentially happened is what we've done is we shifted from 50-50 to like 10-80. Or 1090, right, in terms of the way it works. You have to do damage, damage, in order to be, like, and it's always been true. It's always been true. Every single time we've ever coached support, our entire lives, we've always told supports to be doing damage in 6v6. So how do you turn around after coaching for years about supports being proactive and doing damage and other things like that? How can damage be a thing when we coach the 6v6 format? And then you turn around and tell me that you have to be more passive in the 6v6 format. You have to be slightly more passive, sure, on some of the heroes, but all that's doing is bringing it back to a balance between the passive and the active styles of play, and there's still plenty of characters that can be active. For instance, Lucio is a more passive character in 5v5. That has been borne out hundreds of times by every single content creator that plays Lucio. Moira is a more passive character in 5v5. There's so many different characters where, you're able to go into the backline, but you will not take a proactive backline position. You will just kind of like chill out. There's a load of characters that are, Season 9 is a big part of it. Of course, Season 9 is a big part of it. Moira feels more busy in 6v6. Yeah, you have a lot more decisions to make in a smaller amount of time. I think I agree with that. So much about 5v5 as it is about Season 9. No, I think even in post-Season 9, this difference still exists in Season 9. Like without Season 9, if you get what I mean, between just 5v5 and 6v6. I agree with you that Season 9 is the cause of quite a lot of these problems that I perceive as 5v5 problems when really they're not. But if we just take the 6v6 game mode we got now and the 5v5 game mode we got now, I still think most of the supports, in fact quite a lot of the more passive supports, are a little bit more aggressive, a little bit less aggressive, but it's a bit of a mix, and honestly it's just bringing it closer to the middle.
Or ironically, I think 66 is really good for mobile DPS because you have the capability of taking a lot of different positions, and as me and Sam have talked about a million times, you can actively trade with tanks now, whereas 5v5 you really can't.
Yes, you're not completely turned off by having a tank on your position, but you have to do that, Jewel. You do not get free space. You have to fight for the space against a fair fight, whereas in 5v5 you take the space for free, and then the fair fight, the unfair fight comes to you.
Not safely. You can't actually win those trades. You can in 66, but there's a lot of other DPS that when you get stuffed in a choke, you don't have that mobility, you don't have that flexibility to take space at angles, even with Overwatch 2 maps. I think off-tank feels much better in 6v6. I think you don't have off-tank in 5v5. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as an enabler.
They're all kind of off-tank in a way because there is no resources to put into you in a bursty way, so you're all kind of off-tanking. You don't have that unstable thing to give to you that gives you that extra impulse to get into the enemy team.
In 5v5. Every tank has to be an initiator in some way, shape, or form, and so that means tanks like Zarya, tanks like Diva, they just don't exist. They just don't have an identity in 5v5 at all. And obviously, I'm sure that speaks close to Hawk, right, considering that was his main role back in the day. I think for 66 to function, and I actually don't even think that you can really argue this with good faith, 66 cannot function without some form of open queue. I don't think it can exist without it. I think that
I think that's untrue. I think that's been borne out by the queue times that we've seen.
Done really well with the semi-soft open queue format because the number one argument against 66 is the queue times, and there is just no solution to that.
There is a solution to that, and I believe it has been mostly solved. And nobody will ever argue this. For some reason, I'm here on my own, yelling to the void about the queue times probably being fine every single time, and there being objective arguments to do with the amount of different characters you can pick, and the amount of different choice that you have in the video game based on other characters. I think with very, very small changes to certain tanks like Roadhog, you can have a very easy, everything is available, and that actually makes the queue times similar, because if you make the demand for the character, the different roles similar by doing the bare minimum to make them similar, then they will be similar. It's not that hard.
But when you have soft open queue and you let players dictate things, especially mid to higher ranks, it's just not much of a problem. I'm not familiar what bronze, silver, gold, or plat looks like right now in open queue. That's probably something that they're going to have to figure out. But I think if you have 66, you have to have open queue.
I don't think
5v5,
that's
you
true.
can have roll queue. And there's a world where we could probably have both. I think that there's still pain points about having open
5v5 roll queue has queue time problems. Can we all just address this, that 5v5 roll to queue has queue time problems? They're not massive queue time problems, especially at the mid ranks, but at the high ranks, they have very bad tank queue problems, because the actual people that want to play tank go to the 6v6 format because it's significantly better. And even before that, people were just, because they didn't have the 6v6 format, quitting the game because the experience was so bad. And there's knock-ons from that. The tanks being so big makes the experience worth for the DPS and is experience worth for the supports. 5v5, big tanks control the same or more amount of space than 2 tanks do in the 6v6 format. That's crazy to me. They are more lethal, they control more space just by being on their own. And that's how you have to have them in order for them to exist, but that's bad for the game.
queue. You log into a game. I had a game yesterday. Lock in, insta-lock life.
20-minute DPS queue in GM5 is so funny. Man, that's so bad.
Insta-lock Mercy, insta-lock Moira, GG.
So it's so weird that Spylo is still making this argument like the queue times for 5v5 aren't bad, and that 6v6 hasn't been outrightly stated by the developer update that just happened to have on average 222 as the format, right? Like, it's kind of crazy. And then people will just like stare dead in the face at you and say, but there's queue time problems. And I'm like, where are the queue time problems? Tell me where they are. Are they in the room with you right now? Where do they exist? I've made these arguments for years. I made arguments that I think they're going to be okay. I didn't make arguments that are going to be good, but I made arguments that are going to be okay. Then it came out, and it was pretty fucking obvious that they were good. And it's like, why can't we? It's crazy, man. Oh, man.
Right, like it's over, right?
If you have the ability to play just your favorite role, most would. Yes, and I think that quite a lot of people have a favorite role of tank with the acceptance that they will get a second tank, right? Their favorite role is one of the duo tanks. That's most people's favorite role. I think it's a very big disincentive for people to lock tank in open queue if they don't know they're going to get the second one necessarily.
But
and that's kind of like the death spiral of tank. That's what happened for ages in open queue. You weren't sure whether you're going to get the second tank or if it's just going to be Roadhog, which, by the way, is an incredibly easily addressable issue that they never tried to address in any meaningful way, any of the tank combinations. We have had no patches that have ever sought to address any of the problems in the combinations between the heroes, none at all. And 5v5 has had almost 3 straight years of patches to try and address the issues in counter swapping. We don't get even a slight bit of that. We don't get any. But yeah, I feel like there's no reason to suggest that with very minimal changes that are sensical for the 6v6 format, that the queue times could be absolutely fine in rogue queue. I see no reason to suggest that whatsoever.
That's you could make the same argument about my solo tank pick Malga and Watchpoint Gibraltar, right? So you're always going to have some sort of agency taken away from you. For me personally,
my solo tank pick Malga on Watchpoint Gibraltar, he's doing the counter swapping versus bad tank combinations argument, sure, but then again we can just do the bare minimum of anything to solve the problems in 6v6. Just anything. Like, name me one patch that has been that has had the effect of making the tank combinations or the types of characters or the variety of characters wider in 6v6 Overwatch without just adding more tanks, since we've done like recently.
And I say this
It's
as
never
somebody
happened.
that doesn't play as much off tank. I generally play more support. I like engage tank, whatever. I have preferred the 5v5 format, but there's a really heavy asterisk here where if you look at my career where I have had most enjoyment, most satisfaction with my work, it has been Overwatch 2 post.
I'll respond to Pablo in a second. Tank synergy against good tank synergy isn't really that bad when support and DPS are so much playmaking as 6v6. Yes, obviously, it's one of those where playing off meta has the effect that when you're playing off meta, people are by default throwing because people are purposely playing off meta, and therefore people aren't communicating, so people get a worse impression of off meta, and therefore off meta gets a lower win rate over time. I think the bad tank synergies aren't actually that bad right now. I don't think they're that bad. And I think specifically things like Priority Pass were the cause of quite a lot of the hatred and quite a lot of the disgust of things like Roadhog. And realistically, Roadhog is fine and can be made good very easily.
Mostly unrelated to 5v566. So my content creation, my hero design critiques, my enjoyment of the game. Honestly, my pro career, Hawk can relate, very stressful, very hard time in my life, was very rewarding, but a very stressful point in my time. And I don't always have positive correlations with that. And so for me, I am a bit of a survivor bias kind of a moment here, right? Where I like 5v5, I have a lot of positive correlations with 5v5, and I could sit there and I could justify why I have those things, but a lot of that's also just because of where my career has gone since 5v5 has come out. So it's unfair for me to pretend that that doesn't have some sort of an impact on my opinion of things. I would prefer it if they were able to keep both. If they have the queue times for it, if they can have the population for a 66 open queue and a 5v5 roll queue, that would be great. I don't know if that's reasonable, I don't know if that's possible, but that would be my preference. I find the game more interesting to coach at a...
By the way, I've just fixed my microphone. I know what is happening. Do I sound completely different or mostly the same? Because I actually had all my filters turned off because I was recording on OBS the other day. So I've now got... I was turning down my gain and it wasn't doing anything. That's why my mic kept peaking. Same? Yeah. I basically don't change my mic apart from... I've got a couple of dips at certain periods to cut out some resonant frequencies from the microphone. And I turned down the bass a little from my microphone. But yeah.
The bass to medium level with 5v5, but his positioning becomes a lot more interesting and nuanced for DPS and stuff.
So let's get back a bit.
More interesting. Hawk can relate. Very stressful, very hard time in my life. Was very rewarding, but a very stressful point in my time. And I don't always have positive correlations with that. And so for me, I am a bit of a survivor bias kind of a moment here, right? Where I like 5v5, I have a lot of positive correlations with 5v5, and I could sit there and I could justify why I have those things, but a lot of that's also just because of where my career has gone since 5v5 has come out. So it's unfair for me to pretend that that doesn't have some sort of an impact on my opinion of things. I would prefer it if they were
it's very reasonable by him.
able to keep both. If they have the queue times for it, if they can have the population for a 66 open queue and a 5v5 roll queue, that would be great. I don't know if that's reasonable, I don't know if that's possible, but that would be my preference. I find the game...
To be clear, the dev update came out after this, so they don't know about that.
More interesting to coach at a base to medium level with 5v5, because positioning becomes a lot more interesting and nuanced for DPS and support.
I do not think positioning becomes a lot more nuanced. I think positioning becomes a lot more about timing and a lot less about accentuating the positioning with different types of support. Support, yeah, I mean, support becomes more interesting because by default, all supports have to be doing DPS. So you have one less character on the team, but on average, that can play more passive. And I don't think the interestingness of the coaching correlates to the enjoyment of the game at low level in any meaningful way.
But I will concede that I think 66 has a higher skill ceiling at the pro level because you have simply just another moving part, and specifically a moving part, the off tank, that can both enable and disable. There's a lot more decisions with off tank. So that's kind of my 2 cents or 20 cents, right? I think, as always, it kind of toes the line, but I think, like, my point is that I have strong opinions about certain facets, but I don't know what would be better for the game. And if we could have both, I would have both.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone here was going to say eradicate the other. So I think that's, a fair stance to take. And I also think kudos to you for kind of being self-aware enough to separate your personal experiences with your actual feelings on the format, right? Where you're saying my life essentially has been better post Overwatch 2, and I can't deny that kind of correlate. In the same way that a lot of people will say that Overwatch 1 was just a beautiful time, and so how much of the format are we correlating with our own experiences of just a once in a generation game, right? Like Overwatch 1, at its launch, at its peak, was a once in a generation game. We were kind of seeing that.
The one thing I will say is I do think there are definite strengths and weaknesses to each format that I just don't think are really inarguable. And so I'm going to stand by those. We'll discuss those. So I think both formats have their problems. And if anybody says that 66 is totally fine, there's no drawbacks, they're idiots. And the same thing goes for 5v5 as well. There are some major
I'm stupid. I'm an idiot.
drawbacks and major problems for both. And so the important thing for me is to recognize that. And I think, Sam, when you and I had our 5v5 debate, is recognizing those.
Too much agreement and not enough conflict. Yeah, but that's because Spylo is saying things that are wrong and nobody's disagreeing with him, right? I've disagreed with pretty much every part of what Spylo said, right? I could have made a notepad and had it down. I guarantee you nobody's going to disagree with them because nobody actually has good arguments for their point of view for some reason. They don't address the arguments from the other side in a meaningful way. Nobody's going to talk about queue time set. Nobody's going to say there's a possibility that 6v6 open queue could work. Nobody's going to do it. It's just not going to happen. It never will happen.
Shortcomings, and maybe there is one that is objectively better for the game, but that still has shortcomings that we have to be aware of, right? So.
Perfect. Now, I know I could sense all three of these guys kind of raring to kind of chime in on some aspects of what you were saying. I'm going to let Hawk go first. Hawk, how do you kind of summarize your stance right now? Maybe you want to relate to some of the things that Spylo said, but how do you summarize your stance on just the general format of Overwatch right now?
Right now, I'll be honest, I'm having probably the most fun I've had in this game since 2018. I'm having so much
Where's
fun.
the 6v6ers that are cheeky fuckers that just want more? Where are these people? I want to talk to these people and have them on the podcast and say, you know what? We've done massive W's, but we've got plenty more to go. Next shot is 5v5 roll queue. We're going to take that out. That's easy. We're just going to keep on trucking, keep on making our arguments. It's just that easy, dude.
Fun in the game.
When you're right, you're right.
I put a lot of hours into like when perks came out, and I think perks are an amazing like addition to the game. Like probably the only addition they've ever really done to the game. That's like a different topic, but I think
For God's sake, literally. Yeah.
they've a lot of the changes they made have kind of taken away a lot of freedoms of the game or like depth. But like perks just add to it, in my opinion. But regardless of perks, perks in 6v6 and this like format open queue, just like it makes me like rediscover like the chaos and the fun like of like peak Overwatch, while also like fixing a lot of the issues that like Overwatch 1 had. Like Overwatch 1 was not a perfect
Stay on topic. They didn't ask you about perks, Hawk.
game. Everyone knows this. Like,
Yes,
we've
and
seen
they've never tried anything to fix the problems with it, such as just changing the heroes normally. So why do we need a perk system in 6v6?
classics. Like they brought back like 3 out of the 4, like in my opinion, the worst patches of like Overwatch for the classics. Like Moth Meta was not a good time. Goats was not a good time for how long it lasted. Vanilla Overwatch, probably the only time I ever actually stopped playing the game, Overwatch 1, because there was no ranked and like the patch was just so weird. But yeah, like I've been having such a good time. I think for the roles, tank on a whole just feels like on a whole just feels better. I do admit that like Smiler said, engaged tanks are they're punishing. Like they are hard. Like they are very, very difficult to get value out of sometimes. But I think what they've done with these perks and like some of the quality life changes of Overwatch 2 is that they've allowed you to like find new ways to get value without having a perfect synergy. Like you don't need to have that bubble on Winston. Sorry, bubble on Winston or a matrix on Winston, or like you don't need to have the matrix on.
Yeah, because everything's pushed towards the middle and hybridized to the point where you can basically do whatever the fuck you want with them. No character has a proper identity. Every character's kind of like made more boring. Yeah, I can see that, right? I can see that.
Diva, or I mean on a Rhine when you're playing Rhine.
And to be clear, part of this is the fact that all the new tanks that have been released are Overwatch 2 tanks, and so are more generalist. So you have all of these tanks like Ram that can combine with Winston by throwing a Vortex down. It's not good synergy, but it's a bit of synergy. You have things like Cardiac Overdrive and Junker Queen Shout in the game that have a little bit of synergy. And as you see, all of the Overwatch 2 tanks, they're just initiators with a little bit of off-tank synergy. That's basically what they are. That's what they are. Even Bull is an initiator with a little bit of off-tank synergy now. And it's one of those situations where, okay, but we had this extremely specialized design space working properly. So why did we give it up without looking at how to preserve it? Because the moment you generalize that design space, right, you go and you take Bull and you make him able to exist in a more like core thing, you've lost the ability to make something that extreme. So we should be looking at the design space, the total map of the things we can create, and we should be picking from the corners in order to create the most varied game experience that we can and the most interesting game experience that we can. We shouldn't be going, well, you in a bit, and we're just going to design here, right? Because then you've lost all of that space. You've lost all of the interesting things you can make. And that's why I don't really like perks, because perks are by default something that's going to more generalize characters and make them less unique in the ways that they work and make their gameplay loops more standard. Winston being able to heal himself with a bubble. Okay, I mean, that's just made it so that Winston's more independent of resources. But I thought the point of him was that, right? Wasn't the point of Winston that he needed the resources? And if he does have that bubble as an allocation to his power level, will he be as good when given those resources? Have we just brought down the peak and increased the minimum? Because that's what I enjoyed about Winston in the first place. He was a specialized extreme hero. Isn't that a cool thing to be able to have? No?
Like a perfect synergy, because there's like you cancel pin now, you have a right click, you have these perks that like can enable you in certain situations, and I think that adds a lot of like individual agency that people kind of like were lacking in Overwatch 1, because there's a lot of like not
because they weren't developing the video game
press synergies, but they were like really defined in Overwatch 1, and there's the infamous one, Double Shield, where it's just so easy to use and like so easy to get value out of for like every skill set, like skill rank of the game, that it really was punishing.
Exactly. Why not add it to the hero? Why does it need a perk? 100%. And even if you are adding to the hero, you should be very careful about the ways you do that. You should think about other ways that you can solve the problem without de-specializing the heroes.
Smile?
Miles raising
I want to interject really fast here, just to piggyback super fast, Hawk. One thing that really freaking irritated me about the last IU566 debate is, and Avril's going to get mad at me, I don't want to talk about how OP tank synergies are.
Yeah, I don't either.
I want to talk about how bad certain tank synergies are, which Hawk has said has definitely gotten better since perks and since a lot of the Overwatch 2.
Well, I don't want to talk about how OP tank synergies are, because for the most part, like, it's kind of bollocks. The people that say, oh, well, there was a Winston Jummy Gumpy with a Zarya bubble, I couldn't do anything. That never happens, and it's only specifically applicable to the very, very, very high level, right? The peak of the high level. I don't want to talk about the peaks as a synergy, because if I talk about the peaks as a synergy, I'm not talking about the average player, and that's what I care about.
Reworks. I think the talk about like, oh, we can't have double shield, the double shield's irrelevant, it's not coming back. And I also don't want to talk about how Winston Zarya is OP because you have to time the bubble because it takes skill to express that. And I actually think that that's just never something that the average rank is going to deal with.
Damn right. Damn right. 100% damn right. Avril's doing the death stare right now. 1,000-yard stare. He's looking at his Google Doc. He's scrolling up and down. And it just says tank synergies over and over and over again. He's in the fucking Shining.
What's more important is that, like, okay, how bad is it to have Winston Malga? You know, or how bad is it to have Diva Roadhog, right? Like, maybe
none of them are quite as bad, right? Winston Malga is not bad. It's fine. Quite a lot of them are very much closer to the middle.
A little bit about that. Again, I do
Philo's misinterpreting what Avril is thinking.
agree that's less bad, but like, dude, that was so boring to watch because it's like, dude,
theoretical
cares, man?
like
the theoretical perfect tank synergy that actually takes skill to do. Like 99.9% of players aren't dealing with that anyway. It's a waste of space. If they get the perfect double bubble off, kudos to them. Let them have it.
It feels way more open, pretty much.
It seems mean to start a conversation by telling Avril that all of his arguments aren't able to be talked about.
What can I say? It feels way more open what you can run.
Seems a bit
I'll let
mean.
Hawk finish this thought, and then I'll let Avril respond because he's been physically referenced there. So Hawk, finish your thought.
I can't believe that you cut Hawk off, Spyro. Everyone get mad at this guy. Everyone get mad at this guy for cutting people off.
Why are you cutting me and cutting him off, dude?
Well, I'm gonna cut all of you off. Hawk, you, and then we'll get to Avril.
Yeah, I'll just finish up on the roles. I've actually probably played more support in like the last like month or whatever it's been, 3 weeks, than I have probably since Rolllock on one of my accounts, just flexing around playing heroes. And I actually think that role feels very, very impactful. 66. Like it feels good to be behind.
Yeah, I think Spyro's talking complete bollocks.
Into the wheel on Kiriko. This hero's been a menace in 5v5 for like 2 years, and I'm like, wow, this hero absolutely dominates at 66. Like you can completely just pound the enemy tanks by just headshotting them one time. They have to back up, or you know you're double TPing around now, which is pretty broken, but it's fun. I've had some success on like playing Alari, just like playing as a third support, like taking off angle. You know, Ana still feels good. You know, like I think support is still really fun at 66 because you have more responsibilities to heal a little bit, but your damage actually matters a lot. Like the damage you do get off, you actually can feel it, like especially on the tanks. And then
it would be even better if we reverted to 200 health balls, wouldn't it?
Finishing off on DPS.
What do you think is the least popular role in 6v6? Tank still? I think it's tank still, but only by like 20%. That's my honest answer, Reward.
I think this role is still like so impactful at 66.
The thing is broken, but it's fun. The cancerous mess that his rivals are spreading. Well, yeah, like perks. Oh man, they're so broken, but wacky, goofy. Oh, it's so fun for like 5 minutes. Okay.
With the passive regen, you're still able to take angles, but you're not able to like get the angle for free like you can.
Oh, the other, because somebody said earlier the knockback passive was a good one that they introduced. I also like the passive healing after 5 seconds. I think that is actually a good addition to the game, and I think Rivals is poorer for the lack of it.
And right now in 5v5, you either work for a little bit more, but when you trade that out for being able to actually impact like the frontline exchange without having to like full-on counterpick the enemy tank playing like Tor or Bastion, it feels good. Like it feels pretty good. I don't have most of my DPS. I probably like 10-15%, probably like 30% on support, and like the rest on like tank. But I've been really enjoying it, and I think this has just been such a good like first like real ranked test. And it's a couple like couple broken things. Most of them, in my opinion, are perks. But I think it's good. Like I really don't have like many major complaints. Like I'm just having a good time. I'm glad it's back, and you know, yeah, that's about it.
Am I just an arsehole? Like genuinely, like every single time I see something silly and goofy like this, I feel like I see through it immediately and only think about the very like worst parts of it. Thank you for the follow, appreciate it. But like I always when I get a double Anonade, I hate it so much that it just overrides any fun I could have. Like I've tried the Bastion perk. I do not get any joy from that. I just get hatred from dying for a nade that happened to be thrown on the floor 5 miles away and happened to hit me, right? Like I just see that and I think, come on, like what am I doing here? Like why am I playing this?
Nice. I'll let Sam go so soon as well, but Avril, or firstly maybe you want to respond if you do want to respond, maybe you're like that's fine what Spylo just said, but maybe you want to respond to that, and then if you want to give your stance on the current format.
Yeah, the temptation to speak out of order here and do the response, and I'll leave the response to like maybe I'll fit the response into what I was already going to say, but I'll do this more in chronological order. So yeah, where I currently stand on the whole thing is like, and this partially goes into what I was saying earlier in terms of reflecting back to the previous debate, which is that I do think there is space for both in the game. And I was probably maybe a little dismissive of that the last time around, although I will say, you know, maybe...
You were dismissive, Avril. Do you know why you're dismissive? Because you thought we wouldn't win. That's why you're dismissive, dude. Because you thought you'd won the argument already. You came into it all smug, like everyone came into it all smug. All the content creators were saying, no way they'd ever do this. And then we won the argument. And do you know what happened? You lost. And now you come back, oh, well, there's space for both. No, I'm going to take it all. I'm going to get 6v6 roll lock, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're going to lose the argument.
Changing things up a little bit here and retroactively maybe changing the stance, but the position I had before was mostly that I don't think the devs can keep up with handling both modes. Now, if the devs can actually put enough resources into handling both 5v5 and 6v6, I don't see why we can't have both in the game. So I've never had this sort of super...
I always think about this, right? Like the resources argument. It's such a weird thing for me. Greed, you can add a map, but you can only add a map on Sunday. I'm not remembering till Sunday. It's such a weird thing. Let's
hardline position that no, we have to have either 5v5 or 6v6, and the other one has to die for sure. Now, if we end up in a world where the devs feel like they can only support one mode, then maybe that conversation has to come up again. But as it is,
people talk about being able to support a mode. I mean, guys, like Didact has done our mode by himself. Like literally by himself in terms of development. And I know there's a load of other things you have to do in order to get patch out for Overwatch. You have to like get console verification and stuff like that. You have to be able to ship it with everything else that wants to be in the patch included. I know just to be able to get patch to live is probably just a day's worth of somebody's work, just to be able to get it to live once you've already done the work for it. But I'm thinking like, realistically, how can they not have enough space to be able to balance both 5v5 and 6v6? Because all you realistically need is somebody who is good enough to be able to balance them, number one, and somebody who's like, you can make changes to these modes at an arbitrary rate because there is no demand to work to make these changes for the most part. Like there just isn't. It's so weird. Always thought it was weird how modders and community members were almost always better than actual balance teams. It's probably just to do with bureaucracy, right? It's just to do with watering down the thing and having to get it approved by so many people, and like it moves so slow because they don't have quite the authority to get it, and then they need to push it live, and that knocks it back by a week and other things like that because we've got a patch going live in a week, so may as well do it then, and that's why it moves so slowly. But in terms of being able to do 6v6 and 5v5 balance, I'm like, just hire a guy. Right? Like just one guy can do this. It's not like you need to be able to design anything in terms of assets in order to be able to balance them both. There's no reason you can't do both at the same time. It's like one guy's worth of work, and maybe even not 40 hours a week is my estimation for how much it would take to balance a mode. So like, why don't we just do that?
Right now, with the current implementation of the modes, maybe there are some like queue time issues. I don't know what all the queue times are currently, but that
high Didact, yeah, 100% high Didact. Didact's incredible. Look at the documentation behind what Didact has done. Right, look at the documentation. It is absolutely incredible the amount of work that's gone into it, the amount of consistency that's gone into it that he's shown. He is 100% the best employee anyone could ever have, as long as he was an employee of mine. He's really good, and if they just allowed him to do the 6v6 mode as a job, like I don't see how that's unreasonable to expect to be able to get another mode off the ground in general.
Be addressed, and I don't know if that ends up being a problem. Then maybe we have to look at like how we end up supporting the modes down the line. But basically, we do have a reasonably large amount of 6v6 players in the game that actually want to play the game in that mode, and they enjoy that. And I think that's fine. For the people that enjoy 6v6, they should be able to play 6v6. For the people that still enjoy 5v5, they should play 5v5. And I enjoy 5v5. It's always been a preference for me. I've never been hardline, like, it has to be this and not that one.
The fence-sitting argument, yeah, if you like that, you can have that. But if you like that, you can have that. I see that is okay. I see that is okay. I don't want to argue for anything now that I've lost the debate. I was never really on one side or the other, guys. Can we get SK on here to tell us what side she's on? Like, that would be quite funny.
I prefer 5v5. It's always been a preference at the end of the day. It's kind of like one of those situations where I feel like I say, I prefer waffles, and everyone says, oh, so you hate pancakes. Like, that's not what I said, dude. That's not what I said. I said I prefer one. Doesn't mean I hate the other one. So I think both are fine.
You were arguing that there is no way that 6v6 would ever go, which was disruptive to the ability for us to be able to get 6v6 live. If he literally just said, instead of his argument of 6v6 will never happen, if he just said, well, there's certain, like, I'd love to try it. It's great. Like, both are fine. I like both. I like 5v5 a bit more, but I've really got no like great opinion in terms of the other way. I'd like to talk about the downsides of both, so I'll discuss the downsides, my downsides of yours. That would have been fun. The simple fact is, by stonewalling this argument, and this argument was 100% stonewalled, first off, it just made the argument bigger and made the support for the argument bigger. And second off, it actually made it a lot harder for Blizzard to push it to live because they considered it to be illegitimate for so much longer.
Fine, but I'm going to prefer 5v5. And the reasons I prefer 5v5, partially some of the stuff that Spider brought up, but it comes down to the fact that I think it's going to eventually, I think it's an easier time overall to balance the game, given that less variables is going to make it easier to adjust things. Now, obviously, the counterpoint is going to end up being like people are going to bring up Malga, and they're going to bring up all the unfun minutes that we've had in 5v5, and I'm not saying the balance team is perfect. In fact, lots to still be decided there, but I do think currently, as it stands right now, you know, when people watch this, they're going to have to remember that, I'm talking in April of 2025, late season 15, just will hit to season 16. The game seems pretty balanced in a good state. 5v5 feels really good right now after the Malga nerf. Most tanks seem pretty viable. The meta seems pretty open. And in general, in 5v5, I don't think there's that much counterpicking happening right now in season 15 compared to previous seasons with the introduction of perks. In fact, they can
Yeah, because you've had 3 years of trying to fix the counterpicking, like literally 3 years of development for it.
even
So
go harder on that and make, perks a little bit more punishing in the sense that right now with perks in season 15,
like the devs have spent like 3 years trying to balance the game on a knife edge when they had a flat surface next to them that they refused to use, right?
if you swap heroes late into a game, you get your perks fast, you get additional XP, you get like an XP bonus. I don't even think they need that. I think they can just get rid of that entirely so that like counterpicking becomes even more punishing. That's just my personal thought. Maybe that's too punishing, but
No, I don't think they need to do that.
I know, I'm just like, if you want to kill counterpicking even more. But the other reason that counterpicking even exists in my mind, and I do think this, by the way, is one of the strongest points against 5v5. So yes, I'm capable of acknowledging that there are issues with 5v5. In fact, I've done it so many times. But one of the primary issues is the counterpicking issue, and I don't think it's enough to just mitigate that by punishing people counterpicking, because you could just get bad RNG. It was like, well, I'm still getting counted here, but I now can't.
When they say the counterpicking issue, they never just say like the general tank experience. They always say counterpicking. It's such a weird one to me because I always feel like the general tank experience is diminished in so many different ways that aren't just straight counterpicking, such as just not having that extra resource being given to you arbitrarily makes it a lot more passive. And then the cooldown structure of the tanks also, since they have to be so big, makes them a lot more passive. You generally are able to do a lot less small aggressive plays in 5v5, and I feel like that significantly reduces the experience. And they always say like counter swapping, but they never say the rest of the problems.
Counter them back without getting punished. That doesn't feel good either. And I think a part of the problem always comes down to the fact that the transfer between 6v6 to 5.
Did you see Flats go on about how he really wants them to go for the jingly keys rival approach for Overwatch, and that he wants things that are so fun for like 5 minutes and then removed? It's so fucking over. Man, what a take. What a take. Screw the game. What's even the point of having a game? I just want to play chess, and next week we'll play checkers instead. Fuck it. It's fun for 5 minutes. It's fine. Yeah, screw it. Just do whatever. Do whatever. It doesn't matter. You know what? Like, let's be honest, guys. We all play video games, right? Why would, like, there's no difference between video games. Why wouldn't we just, like, play different video game instead?
5 was never done completely. We talked about the fact that even on the previous debate, they being Team 4, were going to adjust all the tanks and maybe rework the tanks and more fit a 5v5 sort of tanking environment. That to date still has never really happened. I still don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know if they're going to do that. It might just be too hard because in Blizzard's mind, some of the reworks are fine, but then some of the reworks are you get Pigpen now for Hog, and it just doesn't do enough to change the hero at all. So a lot of the problems I see with counterpicking is actually coming from the Overwatch 1 heroes, and particularly the off tanks I touched up on, which just don't have an identity in 5v5 as a solo tank.
Yeah, well, no shit, the problems with the Overwatch 1 heroes. They changed the format out from... They rug pulled half the fucking tank cast, and then they were able to design new tanks that could be more generalist. Like, all of the specialist interesting heroes, the ones that are actually really cool, because they're on the fringes of the design space of what you could push it as far to the side as possible and get that extreme, fun, unique thing, right? What they do for Overwatch 2 is they're like, yoink, back into the middle, yoink, all squishy, you don't get to be interesting anymore. Every fucking tank's a hazard. Yeah. You're a tank that can generally brawl, but also you can put some pressure with a movement cooldown on a space over there. You can stand on main. It's boring. It's so boring because there's low variance between the heroes. It's awful, man.
It's really hard to play these heroes and have a solid identity because, they're just not designed.
Yeah, they were relying hard on the reworks in the OG debate. They were, weren't they? And they tried so hard to make it work as a worst thing. And every single change to make it work has made the game poorer.
That kind of main tanky kind of way that can cover a lot of ground. If you actually look at the way tanks are designed now in 5v5, in modern Overwatch compared to Overwatch 1, the tank designs, everything from, I want to say Sigma onwards, because Sigma even feels that way a little bit as well. Everything with Sigma onwards feels way more inclined towards 5v5. They can also do...
Generalist is the word you're looking for, Avril. Generalist. They can do everything. They have more buttons. They are not simple concepts that have been iterated on to make them more interesting. They are not developed to the degree that they have to be. It's not, okay, guys, we want a character that bubbles themselves and allies. What can we do with this to make it interesting, right? How can we do this as well as we can? It's, okay, we've got a guy that has a gun and a rock and a lunge with a knife and a block, and the block damages, but like only to protect you from the front. Like it's just this like stacking of things on things on things, and yeah, like they're more applicable in more scenarios because they can do everything, and no character can't do everything, right? Like just give Anna a jetpack. Fuck it. I mean, it could be played in more scenarios. It's fine.
Do a lot of
It's fine.
things. They're way more generalist tanks. And before everyone says, well, that means that they
Hey! He said the word. Yay! There you go. He said the word. Fair enough to you, Avril. Good job.
do the same things. Like, no. Stop being hyperbolic, guys. They do enough that they cover a lot of ground without like being.
Oh, he was disagreeing with us when he said they were generalist. That's good. That's good. He got the point. He got the point. That's my point. And he's saying no. Okay, that's cool. I'm actually going to go back 10 seconds just to make sure I got his full argument, because I would not, guys, I would not like to misrepresent Avril.
Everything from, I want to say Sigma onwards, because Sigma even feels that way a little bit as well. Everything with Sigma onwards feels way more inclined towards 5v5. They can also do a lot of things. They're way more generalist tanks. And before everyone says, well, that means that they all just do the same things. Like, no. Stop being hyperbolic, guys. They do enough that they cover a lot of ground without like being absolute master of all trades. Like, it's like they're capable.
If they are all capable of covering a lot of ground, that means, Avril, that you cannot make a tank that cannot cover a lot of ground. So you have lost that design space.
Solo tanks that have less weaknesses, but maybe in some regards, maybe even less strengths in like the pure 1-to-1 regard than some of the old tanks. What I'm basically saying is like a lot of the old tanks, if you look at the Rhine designs and stuff like that, the super dated designs, obviously tanks.
Wait, 1 sec.
Tanks that have less weaknesses, but maybe in some regards, maybe even less strengths in
less weaknesses and less strengths. What is he talking about?
They do enough that they cover a lot of ground without like being absolute master of all trades. Like, it's like they're capable solo tanks that have less weaknesses, but maybe in some regards, maybe even less strengths in like the pure 1-to-1 regard than some of the old tanks. What I'm basically
He's just describing being more generalist, right? And he's saying it's hyperbolic to say they're generalist, but he's describing how they're more similar, right? Like, right? I just want to go back through this because I feel like this is like I don't want to misconstrue what he's saying.
and it just doesn't do enough to change the cat here at all.
We're just going to do this 30 seconds. 40
a lot of the
seconds.
problems I see with counter picking is actually coming from the Overwatch 1 heroes, and particularly the off tanks I just touched up on, which just don't have an identity in 5v5 as a solo tank. It's really hard to play these heroes and have a solid identity because, they're just not designed in that kind of main tanky kind of way that can cover a lot of ground. If you actually look at the way tanks are designed now in 5v5 in modern Overwatch compared to Overwatch 1, the tank designs, everything from, I want to say Sigma onwards, because Sigma even feels that way a little bit as well. Everything with Sigma onwards feels way more inclined towards 5v5. They can also do a lot of things. They're way more generalist tanks. And before everyone says, well, that means that they all just do the same things. Like, no. Stop being hyperbolic, guys. They do enough that they cover a lot of ground without like being absolute master of all trades. Like, it's like they're capable solo tanks that have less weaknesses, but maybe in some regards, maybe even less strengths in like the pure 1-to-1 regard.
I feel like he's just getting wrapped up in words, honestly. I've never had so many words. He's trying to say they're more generalist, but downplay it is what's happening here, in my opinion. I don't know if anyone else like disagrees with that. I feel like he's trying to say they're generalist, but downplay how generalist they are. And he's kind of like conceding the point, I think is the point, right? He is conceding the point that the tanks are less interesting in this design because they have to have certain things. But he's trying to spin it in a way that is positive. I think that's what's happening, and that's why he's struggling so much, because it's really hard to spin this as a, no, you're being hyperbolic, etc., because every single thing that the tanks have to not have is something that you cannot design. That's just the default.
Than some of the old tanks. What I'm basically saying is like a lot of the old tanks, if you look at the Rhine designs and stuff like that, the super dated designs.
They're not dated, they're specialist. That they are high resource demand in certain scenarios in a way that you can't have, which puts interesting texture into the game, because if you do not have a character that can draw a high resource demand, then you cannot have a character that draws high resource demand. Do you see how that is? Like that thing over there, if you pull it into the middle, you can't have that anymore, right? And if all of your solutions are just yoink into the middle, then you've got nothing. There's just boring, because there's no like you can say like mobility and resource demand and ability to shoot from range and ability to broaden. You put all of these into the middle, right? You're like, and then you just have nothing, right? You just they're all in the box, and you can say like the box is still interesting. I agree with you, the box is still interesting for some people, but we have less, right? Less variance.
Fit in a 5v5 because there's just so many outstanding weaknesses. It's obvious why a lot of Overwatch 1 tanks need an off-tank pairing, because you need these guys to have some sort of support on the side from another tank to mitigate, to allow you to, basically overcome some of the built-in weaknesses to the tanks.
Of course.
And that causes
Specialist, yes.
situations where you get counterpicking where,
No,
there's-
because we can actually fix this without making them more generalist. There's ways to fix this without making them more generalist. Or if you do make them more generalist, you do it with a scalpel, not with a shovel, right? You literally take away the pain point of that character in whatever way you can in order to make, like, for instance, do you know how to make D.Va a little bit more generalist in the way that they do things? You take a little bit of damage off of micro missiles. You take a little bit of damage off the primary fire. You put a little bit of that damage into the boosters' impact damage and the AoE on the micros, right? It's made them a little bit more generalist, a little bit more brawly. It does the same things. It scratches the same itch. I'd say it scratches a better itch, but it's took them a little bit further away from the single target, insta-kill somebody on the side, has to have somebody for the DM kind of like archetype. Right, we scalpel it. When we see people at these fringes and we think they're problematic, what we do is we target very precisely what we actually want to change to make them a little bit closer to the middle, but in a healthy way that doesn't have to bring them very close, but still allows them to synergize with all the things.
Zarya's beaming down the divas. I don't know how you're going to fix that unless you do something with Matrix, or you just you fix kind of the interaction between beam weapons and the Matrix. I think Matrix
you can't, but you can in 66. That's kind of the point.
is just a super insane design in the first place. I think it's super problematic.
I'm just gonna ask you to finish your thoughts
and-
soon, Avro, by the way.
Yeah, and I guess I'll finish by somewhat addressing Spylo's commentary there as well about the tank synergies. Yeah, maybe I'm like overestimating a little bit how important it is, but it's still an important point to me, and I'm still going to keep talking about it because it is still the most important synergy.
I want to keep talking about this because this Google Doc in front of me, man, all it is tank synergy bad, like over and over and over and over, all work and no play makes tank synergy a bad, dull boy. Oh man, I'm gonna have to talk about it.
From a 66 standpoint in the game compared to any other synergy, any inter-role synergy that exists in the game between damage, support, and tank is still the one that has the highest impact in terms of the synergy between itself in the same role, just based on how the
I
mitigation.
don't think that's true at mid rank. I don't think that's true at low rank. I just don't think that's true until you get into the very high ranks, and I just don't give a fuck about pro. We've already said that pro, like, we've already admitted, Spider's already admitted that we have more depth in the pro level, so I don't think that's really a problem. If we have more depth, then the pro's going to be happy because there's more depth, and then at mid ranks and low ranks, these things don't realistically happen. You took a bubble at an arbitrary time on a Winston or a Rhine, and the bubble goes on, and it does stuff. It does do stuff. It's good, but it doesn't do that much.
abilities work. Damage and healing still operate on 1-to-1 factor in terms of ratio. Damage mitigation does not operate in that way. Damage mitigation operates in a multiplicative way, not a linear way, which makes it extreme in terms of how the synergy ends up working. And that still needs to be addressed in 66. I don't think it's fixed. I think perks have at least allowed tanks and modern tank changes, like Ryan being able to cancel charges, allowed some of the tanks to have a little bit more control and like shore up some of the old weaknesses. But it doesn't mean that those synergies don't still have huge impacts in the game in positive and negative ways.
No, it means that those weaknesses need to be put back into the mode. That's what it means. Like, let me just go for the last 30
I'm
seconds.
like overestimating a little bit how important it is, but it's still an important point to me, and I'm still going to keep talking about it because it is still the most important synergy from a 66 standpoint in the game compared to any other synergy. Any inter-role synergy that exists in the game between damage, support, and tank is still the one that has the highest impact in terms of the synergy between itself in the same role, just based on how the mitigation abilities work. Damage and healing still operate on 1-to-1 factor in terms of ratio. Damage mitigation does not operate in that way. Damage mitigation.
Yes, that's the point. It doesn't operate in that way because instead of being percentage based or something like that, it's timed. And when you time something very well, then the mitigation goes up from it disproportionately. That's kind of the point, right? The tank off tank synergies is like 3 seconds or 4 seconds. The trouble was when the synergies were so good and they had so many resources that they weren't timed anymore. They could just be stacked with the support resources and barrel on and keep going and keep going and keep going. But the point is, you can play around a timed resource by just not interacting with them during that timed resource. It's fine. You have to give the ground, don't get me wrong, you do have to give the ground, and that sucks in certain scenarios. But then again, like, it is a trade-off, right? They've given the resource to them, they don't have it to give someone else.
Operates in a multiplicative way, not a linear way, which makes it extreme in terms of how the synergy ends up working. And that still needs to be addressed in 66. I don't think it's fixed. I think perks have at least allowed tanks and modern tank changes, like Ryan being able to cancel charges, allowed some of the tanks to have a little bit more control and like shore up some of the old weaknesses. But it doesn't mean that those synergies don't still have huge impacts in the game.
So interesting there that he wants their weaknesses shored up instead of the other characters changed in order to stop the bad matchups again, right? It's like he's talking about Ryan without Zarya, like Ryan is completely lost without Zarya or D.Va. Like if Ryan doesn't have specifically Zarya or D.Va, they're screwed. When Ryan Malga is really good, Ryan Junker Queen is really good, Ryan Ram is really good, Ryan Sigma is really good, Ryan Arissa is quite good. The only thing that's actually bad is Ryan Roadhog, and he's really the only thing you actually need to nip in the bud. I'm gonna be honest. You do the breather change, you allow Roadhog to give his breather to Reinhardt for 3 seconds with 40% damage reduction and 80 healing per second. It actually fixes I'd say about a third of the bad matchups in the game in total. Like, you can just do that. Like, it just fixes it. But we've never had a single change that actually makes it better.
In positive and negative ways.
Okay, thank you. I'll quickly, Hawk, because I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah.
Quickly, because I know Sam's been very...
Yeah, a hero with no weaknesses also has to have no strengths, otherwise it is OP. Or it has to have very specific strengths in a very narrow way. Yeah.
patient, so I'm going to let him go in a
No,
second.
let him go. Let him go.
I just want to ask Alvaro, like, what tank synergies right now in 66 do you think are like super problematic? Like,
What a man. What a fucking man.
where it's like, wow, I can't do anything about this because I kind of want to get this out of the way. Like,
He's going to say Winston Arissa like he put on Twitter.
I just want to say, like,
If we
I
do
don't.
this- If we do this, Sam's not going to talk. I'll go.
I'm
In my
I'm
experience,
enjoying the
like,
ride.
I've been winning and losing to the most like rancid tank comps known to man. Like, it doesn't feel like just because I matrix my Ryan, I'm winning automatically. Like, there's still like a skill matchup if they're on
Mhm.
a hog ball. Like,
Because all of the new initiators have some sort of synergy.
I didn't say you would win automatically.
no, obviously when
Time to move the goalpost. You said 2 seconds before he said I didn't think they win automatically. No, he doesn't think they win automatically, but that's not what Hawk said. Hawk said, which are the bad matchups? Name them so we can talk about it. Right?
I'm acting, I'm just like wondering like what's like so problematic to the point
Name
where
them.
we have
Let's get specific, Avril, right? Let's get very into the weeds and say exactly what you think is problematic.
to remove a tank in that regard.
I'm going to leave it up to SVB here because if I go, this is going to be a whole topic.
Which
You
is
know what?
which is
Let's-
fair. It's fair enough to Avril. He is tapping out, but he did talk for a while, and SCB was already trying to move off him. But it's SCB's fault for only inviting one 5v5er to the 6v6 versus 5v5 debate.
So let's put a little pin on it just for now.
Okay.
I will let Sam. I just want Sam to actually give his stance because it's been a while since we heard from Sam. It's important to hear from everyone. And then at some point we'll come back to just like the reflections. We'll talk about that in the reflection stage because we still have a lot to like.
What Hawk should have done is follow up on that question to say exactly what the bad matchups are and why they aren't bad. Right? He should have gone through them. He should have gone through Sigma Diva, Sigma Zarya, Zarya Diva, Roadhog Diva, Roadhog Zarya, Winston Arissa, Winston Sigma, maybe like those 8. He should have gone through it and he should have just like ticked them off and said like they're not actually that bad right now. That like seriously most of the problems have been solved.
How do we reflect on it now with not just Overwatch but also Marvel Rivals and what problems that's brought up so we can say
No. To be fair, Avril had talked for a while and then passed it on, and then Hawk passed it right back to him. So it's very good for him to pass it on. Like he can't really answer that. He could have, but it would have just been those talking for the next like half hour.
remind me if I forget to bring up this whole tank synergy problem. But Sam, go ahead.
So just to
Yeah,
remind
and I
me,
feel bad for Avril, honestly, being the only guy.
the question is like what my reflections
Yeah,
are. And,
yeah,
like,
your
what it is
current
now.
stance
Okay.
on like the format, right? Like how do you feel? And if you want to chime in
So-
anything said, then go ahead.
So I remember the one take where I was like, I think this could happen, but I'm not sure if it will. Is that something would happen? At the time, we didn't know Marvel Rivals was going to exist. I think the thing that really proved it was Marvel Rivals, that it could work. But there were a lot of murmurs, and it was clear that there was demand for it. It was that I was a massive roll lock, or not roll lock. I was a massive roll queue advocate. I thought it was one of the best things for the game at the time to get away from goats. And I will toss Avril a lob here. I think an old Blizzard take from Kaplan's team, because I know he loves to go in and dog on it, was incorrect. And Marvel Rivals and actually Overwatch 2 have both proven that to be incorrect. In that it's not true that everyone just wants to play DPS. It turns out when you put out compelling products and compelling, remember the analogy, the ice cream analogy that Jeff used, that everybody wants to get vanilla? Well,
Do you
it
want
turns out
to
there's
refresh? Do you want because for anyone who doesn't
Yeah,
know,
it turns out that you didn't make any tanks. It turned out that you released with 5 tanks and added 3 over the course of the game. Like there was no variety, and now you have the same problem in Rivals where they did exactly the same fucking thing because they can't learn the same lesson. That was pretty obvious. The first lesson you need to learn from Overwatch, you could have just like looked at a history of Overwatch video and seen all the problems like instantly, and they just didn't.
just refresh that
so
analogy.
there was an old
Yeah,
analogy
the biggest drama in Rivals right now is how ass open queue is. Yeah, 100%.
that the devs used when trying to solve the queue time issue in roll lock.
Yeah,
it was
do you know what they did? They did nothing ever to increase the gameplay experience, or the variety of types of experience on offer, or the variety of hero fantasies on offer, or the types of characters that were in the role, or the variety. Like the only variety they put into the role after launch was literally Bull that does the same thing at Winston, but in a more interesting way, which was hard to onboard, to be clear. So quite a lot of the casual, if I can talk, players didn't play it. And then Orisa and Sigma, which were the most boring thing you've ever experienced. I'm going to be honest, poke tanks are more boring by default. And they thought by introducing Winston and, Sigma and Orisa that they were making more FPS-y tanks because they had guns. Of all of the arguments, right? So the DPS players will like to play them. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Kaplan's team, and I think at the time
Yeah,
they
to be fair, they did actively make it worse, yeah.
said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who remembers this, but essentially the analogy they used about tank support and DPS was an ice cream shop, and that DPS was vanilla, and that everybody wants vanilla, and that it doesn't matter how much strawberry ice cream you have. At the end of the day, people want vanilla.
Yeah, don't question it. We're out of strawberry ice cream. You can't fucking buy it 3/4 of the time. Everyone's ordering vanilla, and they don't even bother to ask if you have strawberry anymore because you're always out because you don't produce any.
Like the volume of specific flavors that you have is not going to change what that customer wants at the end of the day when you're going to an ice cream shop. It turns out that, at least in the gaming space, I think, would you guys agree with me at this point that that's not true?
Because the DPS isn't just vanilla, the DPS is ice cream as a concept. And then over here, you have some soft serve ice cream with the scoop and the sprinkles that you can serve. And over here, you have some like calipos, like frozen ice pop thingies for people that aren't English, right? You actually can serve a variety of products and they are meaningfully different. So if you increase a variety of those products, you can actually increase demand on them, regardless of whether one actually has more base demand per hero or per point of effort put in. Calipo is Calipo. There you go. It's one of those. You happy? Yep. Source of ice cream is so peak. Exactly, right? Tank is peak. I agree.
Add a lot of...
Why is everyone buying ice cream when it's all I attempt to sell or market? There's so many people that want ice cream. I should make more ice cream. They all want ice cream. I have to make more. Why won't people buy my other things? I've made none of it and tried to market it in no way, shape, or form, nor increase how good it is. I don't even have the price outside. It's just there, right? My soft serve ice cream machine just sits in the corner. It's in the back corner, so you can't even see it, right?
Compelling characters in either role that will make people want to play them, people will play them. I think Marvel Rivals has really proven this with how high their support pick rates are in a lot of different characters, and really, frankly, how
support's always been popular. Always been popular. Crazy. The only problem ever has been, and that's the telling thing when we released Overwatch. Do you know what we had? We had a lack of support players. Do you know how that happened, guys? That we had a lack of support players. Weird, isn't it? Maybe it's because we had 4 supports. Four. So the support role is actually really popular in general. 4 supports are being generous. Oh yeah, wasn't it 3? 5 was Sim? No, it was 4, then 5 was Sim, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Lucio, Mercy, 3 was Symmetra, 3 plus Sim. Yeah, it's Lucio, Mercy. Who else was on launch? Zen, Mercy, yeah, the 3 supports. And weirdly enough, when you only have literally vanilla, nobody will buy your ice cream because there's no variants in it. Like literally 3 supports, and we had a support problem. And then Rivals releases, and it's like, whoa, we've got loads of support players. Where'd they come from? It's almost as if they always were there. They were just forced to play one of 3 characters. Like, how can you not see this? How can you not see that the variation in styles of play in a fucking hero-based shooter, which is defined by the amount of styles you can play and the variants and the types of things you can create, that the support variant doesn't increase the amount of people playing support and extract that to the tank role. It's just they're like, well, in World of Warcraft, people don't play tank. And I'm like, yes, because they have to grind levels in World of Warcraft, because you put artificial barriers in the way of leveling in the character, so all you can do is dungeons. That's why there's no tanks, and tanks have a disproportionate amount of responsibility because there is one tank in the majority of scenarios, which is something we've replicated in 5v5.
Seeing queue times flip-flop all the time in role lock formats between, at one point DPS was the highest queue time, but then it went to support, so waiting 15 minutes of queue when like Ilari had come out and like it was a very good role and people want to play support. So I think that narrative has been destroyed. Does anybody disagree with that, or does anybody want to chime into that before I go to the next point, like any rebuttal?
It's interesting there that Sam's addressing I didn't expect him to address queue times. Do you think he's going to go on to argue that tank queue times actually could be good?
And
they argue.
I don't think support's ever been the question, to be honest with you. I think support has always been a relatively popular role. The question has always been tank. And that one is such a hard one for me because I do think that a lot of Overwatch 2 tanks are relatively compelling, even in 5v5. But Rivals for me, like I was talking with Hawk about this separate discussion, but I think Rival tanks are complete boring. So I've never found any of them.
Tanks and supports are completely boring.
Personally compelling.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
so I see what you're saying though. It's like you could say like it's strawberry ice cream, but that's like a lazy analogy because it's like, okay, well, what about banana ice cream, or what about like eventually, like if you could make enough compelling, but I don't know, tank is still tank, so I still think it's going to be difficult.
But it can be mitigated is the point. Like
I think nobody's willing to make the argument. Why is nobody ever willing to make the argument that is obviously borne out by every statistic we have? Why can't people make this argument? What is so hard about arguing that tanks could be as popular as DPS or supports? We know DPS are popular by default. We know that supports are popular by default. We know that tanks are a more complicated role that have more demand, so they're going to have an audience that is built over time. And we know the tank population goes down when there's bad experiences and up when there's good experiences. Why can we not build a tank population by putting the variants of tanks in and making a good experience? Why is that impossible, right? We can literally see right now that OpenQ is in 222. Like, it's in 222. That's what is played. People would play more tanks if they could. Genuinely, they would. And it's not even about being able to play the game. It's about the fact that they enjoy that. That's it. They enjoy playing with another tank. When you have weird resources going into you and you can go on off angle and you can go and do interesting things, people actually enjoy that. They just don't enjoy solo queue tank. That's all they don't enjoy.
Okay.
We at least me personally, like I was under the presumption that's like 100% fact. You can never sway it. Like it is what it is. But I think you actually can. I think there actually are a lot of ways that you can do that. Point number 2 that I think
let me just quickly, Sam. I'll just quickly earn my money as a moderator, which is that I've actually gone and found the quote. So I'll read you the quote. And at least if we trust this source, it says, Jeff Kaplan said, "This is how I've been thinking about it. Imagine we're an ice cream store and we have 3 flavors of ice cream. We have chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, and you have to line up all 3 flavors separately. So imagine the vanilla line is way, way longer than the chocolate or strawberry line. I feel like it's the wrong philosophy to ask, what can we do to convince the vanilla people to like strawberry more? It makes more sense to say we need more vanilla ice cream." So there you go.
And that's what he did. And that's what he did, right? He just did it. He just made more vanilla ice cream, right? It's certainly a take. That is utterly wrong. The idea that there is nothing about the tank role that is compelling is so utterly wrong. The idea that there is no way that you can make the tank role variable and interesting enough to have it be compelling has never been borne out in any game. And every single analogy people use with MOBAs and stuff like that has no relevance, because Overwatch is a game where, and hero-based shooters are games where, people are more squished in a 3D space and can all interact together at the same time. Like you can actually all interact together. So tank and space control in general, and that's why Rivals are boring, by the way, because there is no space control in Rivals, because where you stand doesn't matter, because you're going to be immune for the next 20 seconds while Luna Snow starts dancing, and then Loki starts dancing, and then Cloak and Dagger goes and does her flips on the point. Maybe 35 seconds, sorry, I was being a bit kind there. There is no positioning, so tanking doesn't matter. The only tanking that matters in Rivals is forwards and backwards, because it's a linear game. It's just linear. It's really boring, I'm going to be honest. So the reason why I don't want to play Rivals tanks is first off, because you can get solo tanked, right? You get solo tanked all the time in Rivals, and that make people not want to lock the tank to begin with, because if you lock the tank to begin with, you're going to get nobody else with you half the time, so that's a poor experience, so people don't do that, and so people just don't want to play it in general. And second off, because there is no space control. Your job doesn't matter. The only thing that matters about your job is your ability to walk into the enemy backline, get kills, and have more interesting ultimates and stuff like that, maybe. Kaplan was a moron who stumbled upon the stuff that made Overwatch good by luck. I don't think Kaplan was a moron. I think Kaplan was an incredibly good manager. I think he, do you know what I say? I say it's very easy to make a hero-based shooter when there are no heroes in the shooter, right? Because if you make random shit, it's always new. But when you've got 20 heroes in it, you actually have to design something. You have to actually understand the game in order to be able to design something that is specialist in a new way, or is hybrid or generalized in a kind of like more interesting way. And as time went on, they ran out of design space that they knew about, and they kept running into design space that they didn't know about, and that was problematic. He wasn't a moron in any way, shape, or form. He has good design ideas. He's it's not that he was bad at managing a live service game. I don't think people get this, right? Nobody knew how to make Overwatch. This is a new genre of video game. TF2 had only had maybe arguably 3 different types of tanks in it, and they weren't diversified in any way, shape, or form, and 1 type of support in it. You can argue for the guns, obviously diversifying it a little bit, but the tank role and the support role are the things that make the hero-based shooter have texture, and this was the first try at it. Nobody knew how to do this. It was new ground. Right, so every development that we had was new. And don't get me wrong, these are people paid to think about the design space of the game full time, right? Like obviously not necessarily Jeff Kaplan, but the people that work under him are paid to think about the design space and how to make this game better. But they either didn't work out the design space as they went along, or they're working on different projects. And obviously, it was pretty much revealed that since 2017, a year after release, they started working on Overwatch 2. So basically, they had no interest in learning about the project as time went along. I think the Rivals devs have are extremely misguided, in my opinion. I think they kind of know what they're doing or what they're trying to create. I think it makes a poor experience for even the people they're trying to make a better experience for. But yeah. You wonder why I haven't been invited onto the SCB podcast? It's an interesting one. No, I haven't ever talked to SCB. I'm not the type of person to DM someone. Though maybe I just should actively just shoot a message over. Bum, 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 bum,
That's not necessarily a bad analogy. I think that at least how it's applied to like this genre, I think it's way more complicated than that, right? And like, so not trying to take a shot at Jeff on that one, but you know, because I kind of agree. Like, I understood the POV, but it turns out, hey, people might like vanilla chocolate chip cookie dough, which could be a Zarya, for example, right? It's still vanilla, but it's like, hey, like I can log on and play Zarya all day, right? You know, maybe that's your answer, is and just do the little things, right? Like even Tank Doomfist, another example, Junker Queen, like very DPS.
I think the Jeff take did irreparable damage to the game. That Jeff take of make more DPS, that was the nail in the coffin of being able to keep this game as a long-term service game.
Tanks, less Orisa, Sigma, and Wrecking Ball, and more heroes that are gonna, you know, draw that actual DPS player in. I think supports were another great example. Kiriko, Ilari, right? Like there's a long list of those characters. I can talk about this in Overwatch or Rivals, but I guess where I take this next is my suspicion in that open, like role lock might not be the answer for my personal preference, right? Because at the end of the day, if super tanks are the answer to a role lock format in 5v5, I just don't want to play that. And for me personally, I think what I've enjoyed the most about 6v6 is the fact that there aren't super tanks with 15 passives and giga abilities. In fact,
yeah, so we can reduce the amount of space that tanks control. That's the point of it. Sadly, the tanks in 5v5 still control a disproportionate amount of space because they haven't been scaled back, and there's a load of Overwatch 2 tanks in there that are way too complicated and control too much space in a abusive way to the actual systems, and so you can't stand anywhere. But still, like, is better than what we currently have just because the health pool's been reduced.
Actually, I think I could see myself enjoying 5v5 open queue when there's not the super tank that kind of gets forced, in my opinion, by the format. So I think what I've been able to reflect on is, what about 5v5 was it that I didn't like specifically? Is it that there's only 5 players on the map? Yeah, it feels a little barren, and I do prefer the energy and the chaos of the 6, sure. But I think the biggest thing for me was the fact that tanks became giga tanks, and it changed so
I prefer the structure and the ability to heal passively, I'm going to be honest. I think most casual players do.
much in the game, and I just didn't find that to be more fun. So what I've come to the conclusion of, SVB, is I am kind of a role lock or a open queue advocate now.
That's an interesting one. 5v5 tanks commanding so much space is also what makes them more boring. AFK on a corner, do less. The thing is, what Blizzard have done, and I think it's a misunderstanding, that I'd say Avril probably agrees with, is that the only way that you can make tanks interesting, or one of the major ways to make tanks interesting, is to make them more lethal and give them more hit markers, because they have what I consider to be a fundamental misunderstanding of exactly how powerful cleaving and AoE hit markers and the ability to control space actually is. The ability to always be active and always be getting hit markers on tanks is addictive and really good and really compelling, but there's kind of like this misunderstanding that we need to make them more DPS-y and get them more kills for that category in general, and therefore they have to make them do less because they're controlling more space because they're able to get those kills.
Rivals has really changed my mind on this, and a prediction I made before Rivals came out, and I'm not sure if it's going to happen yet or not, I don't really know, full disclosure, is that Rivals open queue would make Overwatch get rid of role lock altogether. And I'm not sold on that yet, but I will say, like, I actually have enjoyed playing open queue a lot, and I've actually enjoyed the open queue format more in Overwatch 2 and Marvel Rivals than I did the latter half of role lock, which really surprised me.
Is there any like combination in Rivals that people think is actually fun? Or is Marvel Rivals open queue just people getting stuck with solo tank? Nobody enjoys triple support, nobody enjoys solo tanking. Those are the two things that are just boring and bad and probably shouldn't be in the game to begin with, and we can consider them a necessary evil to get the queue times down if that was a problem, which, let's be honest, it will be a problem because they have no tanks in the game because they didn't make any. Are there any other combinations of like 1-4-2 that, like 1-4-1, that people find enjoyable or stuff like that? It like is too, there's no other combinations, right? Nothing else is interesting. So why are we, what's interesting about open queue? The 3 tank isn't interesting. You can't, 1 tank isn't interesting. DPS just kind of is a wash because DPS is what it is. 1 support is useless and you can't do it. 3 support is boring. And then all the rest is just iteration on the amount of DPS you can have, right? So like, yeah, it's just your team throwing by picking 4 DPS. That's just it. So Marvel Rivals is 2-2-2-Q, because everything else is trash and awful to play, and everyone agrees that it's awful to play, and people agree in general that the supports are so passive that the only way that you can have triple support and it be interesting is by one of them being fucking Jeff and being a DPS anyway. Which, let's be honest, Jeff is just in the wrong role. So like, what's the variety there What's the good part there? With stubble, yeah, this is 8 days, Margot. Thank you for noticing, appreciate it. It's actually really uncomfortable. I just don't know, man.
Surprised me because that was something that I was really on the train of. I was a big Rollock advocate when it came out, and I think it was better than Goats, sure, but I think that maybe Goats should have been handled differently. To give Frito credit, I know he's not. He might sneeze right now when I say this. Having bans in an open queue format is game changing. I can't believe that I was not on the ban train earlier. I would like to see Overwatch go to a 6v6 open queue ban format, at least whatever the 6v6 format is. I don't really care if 5v5 stays in the game.
Let's not, guys. Let's not talk about hero bans today because the entire internet will lose its mind if it hears my take on hero bans. I might just, as follow up to the Rivals video, just make a hero bans video. Not sure about it, but I feel like it's one of those I have an interesting take that for some reason everyone else is insane about. So I might make a specific hero bans video.
I have 66. I can go play that with my friends, and I enjoy it. But that's
Right,
really the big
Random, what do you want? What do you want? Do you want me to just stop making videos on YouTube?
biggest surprise for me is my shift. God, Nathan's probably sneezing right now too. He just ran a 10K marathon. I don't know if you saw. He got up at 4:30 in the morning. He went and ran that. But yeah, no, I mean that's been the biggest takeaway for me, SVB, is that I actually, and I know Hawk is probably grinning over there too, because dude, like you were right, man. I told him, I literally before the debate, Hawk was like, dude, we got to talk about OpenQ. I was like, do not fucking talk about OpenQ. That is such a massive can of worms, and we cannot get to that.
Last one?
Yeah,
The first debate?
You wanted to
I'm
talk
like,
about
whatever.
so
Like,
bad.
I can't convince
Yeah,
people of
We had
that.
a whole doc, SVB, and I tell you what, if there's ever a documentary about the debate, I will send you the doc, and you'll see the comments from Hawk and I. Like,
Yeah. Jeff is an 850 HP flanker that is immortal, that can heal himself passively for like 40 health per second. Hi, Alfie.
4:30 in the morning, like just like I'd wake up, there'd be like just all these comments, but no, I've actually gone to the OpenQ train. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. But I think with perks and all the different, particularly now that they have way more supports in the game and way more tanks in the game that are actually compelling to play. As Philo, they've got it's not just strawberry in the tank roll where you can only pick Orisa. They've got, vanilla chocolate chip cookie dough, Oreo swirls, a lot of stuff that lets the vanilla people kind of enjoy that, and I think they should do a lot more of it. I think they've done a really good job. Even Malga to some degree. So yeah,
Isn't your take on hero bans that it's bad to take things out of the game and that's it, or is there more? I said we're not doing. That's a very clever bait, Kazooie, to ask me my opinion on it in an interesting way when I just said we're not talking about it, isn't it? That's an interesting attempt there. I see what you're doing. Yeah, all right, okay, yeah.
I'm really loving OpenQ 66
Almost
Perk
got
Watch.
me.
I think the perks update is easily the best update that Overwatch has ever received. Easily. I don't even think it's a competition. Best update they've ever done. Really actually lives up to the name Overwatch 2 for the first time, in my opinion. And they've really found their they've found their voice on it, and they really should keep hammering on
It's
it.
muddled as hell, Overwatch 2 right now. There's so many band-aid fixes to 5v5 that are still existent in the game. Remove the Season 9 health pools, remove the DPS passive, remove like the support passive, remove some of the damage knockback mitigation on tanks in the 6v6 format, remove the perk system entirely, work like 5 or 6 of the perks into core parts of the kits. There's so many different things that are just things to fix 5v5 that are just like, yeah, out there.
They should be really happy with what they've done, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point to segue onto the thing that I was inevitably going to get to anyways, which is just that while there is this ostensible
If the devs balance from stats and a character has a lot of bans, they might do something. How will the devs know why the character is being banned? Out of curiosity. Without community uproar. Do you trust them to know?
divide between 5 5 6 6, there's actually maybe an intra divide of role queue versus open queue, right? Because I think that's another thing, and I think role lock versus,
because you could do a preferred role queue, which is something I want to bring up. Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure, okay, yeah, it's important to get the terminology right, but let's just say 2-2-2 versus open queue, right? Let's put it that way. So 2-2-2 versus open queue, or 1-2-2 in the case of 5v5 versus open queue. And again, I think it's funny, this is where it shows the kind of intersectionality of opinions on how the game should be, because I think it's like, funnily enough, Hawk and I had like a little DM exchange. I think when a while back, I made like a video summarizing like the history of like the formats of like how we went from one format to the other. And in that, like, after summarizing everything, I suggested the format that we brought up on this podcast a few times, Sam, which like maybe we should try like an open queue in 5v5, or like with a soft lock where you can't have more than like, let's say 2 tanks or whatever, which is ultimately what they've kind of done in the 6v6.
Yeah, fastest SSD wins.
And I got a DM from Hawk being like, yo, I watched your video and I actually really agree. I think open queue was the real loss in Overwatch. And me and him were like, yeah, I agree. I think like open queue was the real loss of like where the fun I felt like started to fade away. But
I'm looking at Overwatch and I'm like, okay, the support's power level needs to be brought down. I think we all agree with this for 6v6. They are too strong in kind of an abusive way where they are better DPS and supports at the same time some of the time. Not necessarily all of the time, not all of them, but they are certainly a lot more stable. They're not as sharp as DPS, and that's why DPS still have a leg up. And tanks need to be brought down in some way, shape, or form. If we do that, after that goes, what combinations are we okay with? Because single tank is out, triple tank is out. We're not okay with that. Blizzard have clearly stated that they're not okay with that, let's be honest. Triple support, do we want triple support in Overwatch? That's just kind of like overriding the DPS queue, right? So we don't really want that. Single support, I don't think that's ever going to be an option. So we're back in the same way as Rivals, where open queue is just 2-2 queue by another name with the ability to throw, right?
Of course, easy to say that at the time they had a different choice to make, they had a different dilemma of goats and how they didn't solve that. So I think let's shift now the discussion to the reflections on this part of it, right? The role limits versus the open queue, and maybe even the soft open queue. I'll take it to
Can I
Hawks.
add something?
Yeah, go ahead, Abro.
Can I add something really fast? Is that
Yes.
I'll make this supremely quick. I
No worries.
disagree with the premise that role queue had anything to do with the goats. It was primarily to deal with just in really imbalanced lobbies with too many of one role and not enough of other roles, specifically tanks.
I think it was clearly both, right? Rare Avril W? I think it was clearly both. Like, role queue was definitely a fuck it, we'll take out goats as well. Like, don't get me wrong, like, both these things are true, but like, the thing is, the imbalanced lobbies and the high queue times are caused by the same problem, right? Which is people not wanting to play one of the roles because its experience is worse or other things, right? So instead of actually addressing the problem, they just put the problem in a different place, right? They took the problem of 5 DPS and they just moved that over to the queue times 1-for-1 without fixing anything about it. Thank you for the follow, appreciate it. Big problem with balancing from stats perspective in role queue is that as long as they're all at a similar win rate, then their actual power level will never be addressed, because you will always have to, it means you, I think they do non-mirrored win rate, don't they? So every support is crazy OP and every BPS is terrible. It means they'll both have a similar win rate, which means the stats are technically true. Well, you can do, they can drill down to non-mirrored and non-mirrored in the role win rate. They can do that. It just depends whether they have the intelligence to do that in order to look. Realistically, the way that you do this is pretty simple. You get a fundamental understanding of the core of your game, and then you test that understanding against what's happening, and you interpret whether the feedback you're getting falls within your understanding, and when it does, you act accordingly, right? You start with the fundamental design space, kind of like landscape argument, and then you go from there. The trouble has always been that Blizzard has always been 3/4 of the way there on this one, or less. Right, so when something happens, they misattribute the reason, or they try and fix it, but not in a way that is conducive to actually fixing it. But it's always been the problem of being one step behind, in my opinion. And that's very easy to say. Obviously, Blizzard is a big company where there's a lot of bureaucracy for every single decision. If there's 20 guys that know what to do at Blizzard, that's still not getting to the surface. But it always seems like they're one step behind, in my opinion. I feel like they've got there now. Don't get me wrong, I feel like they got there now, but not in terms of things like Season 9 health pools, not in terms of things like the DPS passive, their impact of the game. They're still behind. And I think part of that is the whole killing your darlings thing, is the work they've done. They don't want to remove it because that was something they did to improve the game, and it must be improving the game because we did it, etc. You don't want to tell people to remove the system they spend hours arguing for in a meeting, right? Because they still work there, they're still there, they're human, they're across the room. So you don't want to say, can we remove your system, sir? In terms of the DPS pass or stuff. Like if somebody was to argue for no DPS pass at Blizzard, I feel like that would be controversial for them.
One second.
I feel like it probably was both two birds with one stone, right? Because on the one hand, go ahead.
It won't be 0% goats. It won't
No.
be, oh, there was zero consideration goats. But I think, and I'm not suggesting that you were saying this, but I've seen from a lot of the peanut gallery people saying it's like, oh, it was because of goats. I'm like,
Sure.
And they just ignore the fact that it was, I think mostly, if we're going to assign a percentage, I'll say 80-20, 80% because they needed to balance the lobbies and make the lobbies fair.
It's such a weird argument, right? Like, we can't do anything about this, so we're going to move all of the problems into the queue time. That's all they did.
Also, then to deal with the goats.
Yeah, I
think
think
it's about DPS and things. So I think like the lobby experience, because I did a lot of coaching at that point in time, a lot of gold, plat, silver, bronze players. Right, I was still in contenders doing streams.
Me too.
I mean, literally, it felt like the majority of games had 3 DPS or more.
Yeah, of course it did. Of course it did. At this point, we had 16 DPS and 8 tanks, 2 of which were boring, 1 of which was bull, and like, of course we did. Yeah, like one was Roadhog. Like, yeah, nobody wanted to. Like, it was even worse. Somebody locks Roadhog, nobody's picking tank in that game. Just what it is. That's why you actually ironically had so many bull players, because bull was this character that actually worked with tank and was fairly flexible. So you ended up with hog and bull torture all the time because the tank was the hog was already locked, and I ain't playing anything else. I'm going to play DPS or I'm going to play bull. So people just learned bull that wanted to play tank because you couldn't reliably pick Reinhardt.
So I haven't noticed that as much in the current implementation. I don't know if it's just like currently. I think also before we move into the discussion, like one question that needs to be is like, what are the advantages of open queue? And it's queue times, right? Like we can all agree that it's like 90-95% queue times with the value of open queue or some form of soft rule queue.
Yeah, I don't see any other value. The ability to throw, I guess, right?
Right.
I think
Some
it's
people
all
watching might be
benefit.
confused.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's- that's
I
all
think
benefit.
there's more benefits though. Some of them more niche than others, but I mean, I could list some of them right now.
Yes, Hawk, you can't make an argument in vague, uncertain terminology. You have to say.
I would love to hear him. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Milo. Appreciate that.
I think I was
He's like, oh, loads of things, but I don't want to bring it up.
before on Twitter or something, but I think that's if you're moving away from like a role shooter into more of a hero shooter to the aspect of my hero pool isn't just my preferred heroes isn't just
The
whatever
ability to swap cross roll, obviously.
I queued or interlocked into one role. For example, whenever I queue DPS and I get Havana or I get Circa Rail, I get so tilted. Like I get unbelievably tilted that I lock myself into this experience and I can't go Sigma and someone else can't go Widow or someone can't do this. And you know, like my hero pool can be Diva, Sombra,
Yeah,
Alari.
that's fair enough. The ability to flex has always been a good argument for it. Like that is a very positive, but I can't think of anything else that is actually positive.
Kiriko. And you know, like I enjoy these heroes. I'm buying these hero skins. You know, I'm actually caring about these skins. I'm actually interacting with the new content instead of saying this is my role. I don't give a crap about the other SRs, and you know, I'm only gonna play this. And I think another big factor. This is very very niche. Like no one really cares about this. That one
You
leader
can't separate ability to flex from force to flex. Good point.
board is nice. I like having one leaderboard compared to three. I think it makes it more competitive. I think you know, it's more interesting. And go back to queue times. I think queue times obviously is a big factor, but like when you lose a bad game,
It's funny that he
and
just kind of like brought up one point there. He's just talked for a little while about.
I'm staying in queue and I'm looking at the replay and I'm looking at I can look at 3 or 4 times before I get a game. I get so frustrated. I'm like, just put me in the game. I don't want to mope and like hope about a loss. I just want to get back into the game. And that's one of the reasons like Rival's so good. Like you just press play again, you go right back into the game in that regard. And from my experience, like from plat to like mid GM, like the queues are instant in 6v6 open queue. At least they were like a week ago.
I love the complaint about Overwatch is it's non-optimized in terms of engagement. I love that.
And it's like wow, like I don't have to wait at all, and it doesn't feel like the comps I'm getting in these games are like 5 DPS unwinnable comps. Like sometimes you'll have solo tank every once in a while, or you have like maybe 3 DPS, and you know it's not it doesn't feel awful. Like 3 supports very very good, but there just seems to be a bunch
You're
of
right. Off roll not being able to practice is a very very bad thing of open queue.
new support players and a bunch of tank players that want to play this format.
Right.
And honestly, like in like the higher ranks, like Masters GM, like there seems to be a lack of like DPS players. Like unironically, there seems to be a missing like pool of like DPS players, because there's just so many tank players and support players in these higher ranks. Maybe that's because they're willing to flex and they're getting higher SR and they're getting like a Kappa inflation.
No, it's because people the tank role is built over a period of time because it requires more understanding. That's basically it. The tank role is a more fanatical role of people that like that certain thing. That does not mean the thing is not appealing to people in general. It means that people try the other thing, then settle on the tank role afterwards. It does not mean that there is no inherent value in the tank role, or it's just these weirdos that like whipping themselves on the back or other things like that. It means that there are genuine things to enjoy about it. Just those things require somebody that has a bit more knowledge of the game.
Of SR because of that. But yeah, those are my like reasons why I think open queue is good.
To add on to that, I think that those roles are just more fun, at least for me. Like I saw the same thing. Like I didn't have a game where there were just like all DPS. I think the new designs in particular, like things like Queen, things like Tank Doomfist, for better or for worse, you do have the Doomfist with like 20 deaths, which might as well be a DPS at that point. How much they're like
Doomfist is really bad. Doomfist needs to be changed. I really wish they did something about the Doomfist. Yeah, that sucked.
But there's a lot of those. Like seriously, there's a lot of those. But it's impressive. Like I think this is something that we brought back up a quick reflection SVB that Hawk and I called that I think he was completely right on, was that there was a claim that like the 5v5 tanks would have to be reworked to fit in 6v6. But I think those heroes fit better in 6v6 because the off tank role can exist.
I don't think anyone claimed that, did they?
Than you could ever.
I think they're boring in 6v6 because I think they're boring, right? Like, I think Hazard is boring. I think quite a lot of the characters that are just like generalists are boring, but I don't want them changed necessarily. Like if I had the controls, I would specialize them a little bit. But realistically, what I do in 6v6, I'd make more characters that were specialized instead.
Ever try to cram them into 5v5. Like Queen
as
as
fewer
an
bad synergies, right?
Yeah,
Like
well,
Hazard can do whatever, Queen can do whatever.
Like, agreed. You saw me. What I did was I specialized Orisa into a less generalist role, and that made them more healthy in 6v6. It's pretty simple.
Doom is fine. Doom can fiddle with a dive tank or a brawl tank, right?
Yeah, and because both of the tanks are like much more relative to like the DPS, and you can actually kill them. Like there's not massive mismatches to where like you feel like every role can like fill like if this makes sense. Like if a DPS is forced to tank in a certain situation, like if you're.
Do you think I should move my mic closer to my mouth? Would this make me more sexy, guys? You know what else does it? Come on, guys. Let's get the bass going. Right, you have the phone. Is this good? Is this good? You happy? You happy with my my voice with slightly more bass in it because I've cut off the sound? To be fair, this room's actually very echoey because I've got basically nothing on the walls. I've got some soundproof foam there that stops the bounce, but 3 monitors in front of me, all angled towards me, is very much bouncing around. Do your best Greed impression now. What, just to get my best Greed impression. Generalists are always pretty boring because it feels like you do whatever. Yeah, but I don't think that's invalid design space, right? I just want the most varied design space in general, right?
You're forced to frontline as a DPS, like you might have an easier time doing that because you're not going to be up against a raid boss Malga if I'm playing Reaper. Like I might be able to make a play. And I think those little things like really add up. So to add on to Hawk, I think the new hero designs like Juno, Kiriko, even Alari, like but particularly the tanks. Holy shit, Junker Queen, Tank Doomfist, Hazard, like all of those heroes are such a massive improvement from what was out at the time in Overwatch 1 with like Orisa Sigma Ball, in my opinion. But I think that adds a lot to it.
Because they released Orisa and Sigma. I mean, it's pretty simple. People find the poke tanks less fun because they're just more boring versions of the DPS, right? Like pretty much it. The people find tanks interesting because they have that cleave and they control space in an interesting way, but poke tanks couldn't.
That makes things a lot more fun.
All catching strays.
So
yeah.
So I'm gonna let Avril and Spilo talk.
Bull's catching strays, but Bull was catching strays there because Bull very specifically had a much harder skill like curve to him. Therefore, the low rank players couldn't play him, or when they could play him, they struggled to have value on him. Like it's pretty simple.
Address Spilo's original question, I think, to summarize of like what are the benefits of OpenQ. I think one, obviously we discussed a few times. Two, as Hawk said, it allows for inter-role flexing, right? So you can kind of switch roles in the middle. It's a potential, and each of these points I think has a counterpoint that you could bring up and say, oh well, what about the times when it's not true? But potentially it can fit a person's hero pool better to flex between roles rather than be locked to a role. You could argue comp flexibility is another one, right? Where you can actually you won't see the same comp every game, right? So it's not like 2-2-2 or 1-2-2. It's like you could get 3 of supports or 3 DPS.
Yeah,
that is both good or bad, right? But I guess
of course.
Inarguably, it's more of a refreshing game. Like it's a different experience every time, right? If you're in OpenQ, you're more likely to have a different game every time. As
we're on OpenQ versus RollQ for another half hour.
Feel free to chime in that people can think of that are.
Okay, I'm gonna be alright. I see how much I can get through by just chilling and not interrupting them quite as much.
Benefits to OpenQ. I think these are some of the major ones. Avril, do you have anything you want to chime in on the OpenQ role?
Yeah, so what's funny, I have a fun potential theory here, is that I think part of the reason why 6v6 feels better now, particularly even with OpenQ in modern day in Season 15 in 2025, is because we had to go through the lessons, the lessons of our past few years of playing 5v5 and even extended beyond that, the years of playing RollQ. So what that basically means is the Overwatch audience has now been conditioned to playing the quote-unquote correct or at least a balanced lineup in terms of roles because we've done that for so many years. So subconsciously, if you've played Overwatch for...
Not really though, right? Like sure, but like not really. I mean, we're playing 5v5 all that time.
Any amount of time in a significant matter in role queue, and now you're suddenly jumping into 6v6 open queue, you're automatically leaning in terms of like a psychological bias towards playing a more balanced composition and filling out your body. You can still be a selfish player and just be like, there's 3 DPSs, I'm going DPS anyway. You could be that guy.
Viewpoints, stacking points, and defending points. Yeah, good luck.
Most part, I think players have been conditioned psychologically to balance the roles themselves because that's what they've played for the past few years.
I mean, sure, like people know more on average, but like at the high ranks, like at low ranks, it's just brownie emotion.
I think there's what on the tank discussion. The new tanks fitting better into 6v6, the new tanks being the Overwatch 2 tanks and just updated tanks feeling good in current modern Overwatch in 6v6 is indicative of the fact that it really proves how much the tank design has matured and how kind of rough around the edges and how basic the tank design, some of the other design of other heroes on other roles.
Here he goes again. Like Winston Reinhardt bad. No, it shows... Instead of that, it shows that more generalist tanks always work together because they are doing the same type of thing. Right, like if every tank can be anywhere at any time, they all have a bit of resources to give to each other. They all have a bit of sustain. They always have a bit of block. Then yeah, sure, they're always going to be pickable together. But like that's just generalist tanks in general. Like saying that new tanks are more interesting because they are more generalists, and then saying like, well, there's nothing really lost by making it so that Winston like has 30 HP on his bubble and doesn't just have the bubble. It's kind of like, no.
Particularly tank design, and Overwatch 1 really was. I have a huge problem with
Yeah, I hope the Hawk question about what tank synergies are bad, so they can actually discuss that.
some of the existing tank designs in Overwatch 1, where there's like way too many glaring weaknesses, way too much reliance on the rest of the team, whether it's going to be your support to giga heal you and pocket you the whole time, whether it's going to be from an off tank to just like support you and damage mitigate for you, or whether it's the DPS, where like, please, I need my DPS just to deal all the damage.
Well, no, supports healed more than they heal now. Back in like 6v6, like back in the day, they heal more, right?
I can't do anything. Mature and modern tank design allows you to do a reasonable amount of different things that allows the game to feel, I think, more updated and just a better experience even in the tanking position itself.
I think that over time, supports have become more aggressive, but Spilo and you are specifically arguing that supports are less aggressive in this mode. So how can you tell me that that's a thing that is making the mode better, if you can get what I mean, right? Like, how can you tell me that the mode is working properly because we learned so much? And I think that's the only real change in how people play that I can say. Like, tanks are playing more correctly. Sure, people might be picking the correct roles more often. They certainly are at the high level. They're probably not at the low level. But really, the big change in the player base is DPS are standing in the right spots and supports are being more aggressive. And one of the complaints for you is that supports aren't being more aggressive. So, like, I don't think this checks.
Quickly, Sam, and then back to Spello.
Yeah, I think
because I know Sam wants to.
Well, I think you're right. Like, and I realize, like, you know, there's just something I butt heads with you guys on maybe a little bit. Spilo, I don't. You tell me where I was like, no, the tanks shouldn't do everything. Like, it's bad if the tanks do everything. But after going back to playing 6v6, I've realized what it was that I didn't like. It wasn't that the tanks can't have abilities to help themselves and play make. It was that they can't have the abilities to help themselves and play make behind all the super stats that everything got. Like, people forgot after playing so much 5v5 just how much raw survivability stats the solo tank was given. So when I play against like a tank Doomfist or like a Queen or any of this like Overwatch 2 tanks in 6v6, when their stats are more relative, I'm way more okay playing against those types of abilities where the heroes are modern designs, like Avril says. So I don't want to retract like one of my old takes, but I want to hone it and like really nail down what my gripe was. It actually wasn't with those designs. I realized it's when they have those designs and insane survivability too. So yeah, Avril, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with generalist designs. That was definitely a part of the design space that need more filling out. I have a problem that Reinhardt got moved into that generalist space as well, and Winston gets removed into the generalist space as well. And suddenly there's nobody that is a poke tank. There's just Sigma, right? Like, suddenly it's Sigma and Roadhog, and that's just it for poke tanks. And I'm like, don't we have like a lack of stuff? Generalist designs are okay when they're the minority. I think they're okay when they're about a third to 2/5 of the cast, right, Tiefling? I think a third to 2/5 is cool for a level, and then I want the rest to be off tank, initiator, and poke, kind of like, that's a minority. Yeah, I wasn't disagreeing with you. No way in hell they made it Winston a generalist. They made Winston more generalist over time. I definitely think the 30 HP per second from the bubble has made Winston generalist. I definitely think by increasing Winston's health bar and reducing his reliance on off-tank resources, they've made him more generalist. Obviously, not to a ridiculous degree. I'm not saying Winston is a generalist hero, but more generalist. Like, he's been brought a bit closer to the center, right? Sigma's not even a poke tank, he's anti-poke, and the tank that actually pokes with the team is Ram. I don't think that is true in 6v6. Monkey ignore armor? Yeah, ignoring armor is definitely more generalist, isn't it? Is giving a right-click a generalist change? Of course it is. Yeah, of course. Of course giving Winston a right-click is a generalist change. Giving him an extra way of generating ult charge without doing his cycle makes him more generalist. Like, they're not necessarily bad. I'm just saying you need to do these with a scalpel instead of a punch. Including the 5v5 changes and perks, I thought you meant just base kit. It's okay. It's okay.
100% what you just said. I wanted to like kind of course correct myself and like really narrow down what one of my big gripes were that I realized.
Yeah, no, I've done plenty of that. Don't worry. There's plenty that I reflect on. You know what? Like, I've updated my take since then. And to just continue on my train of thought, and I've only maybe got like one thought left, and then we can go on. But yeah, in terms of like the whole role queue versus open queue sort of situation as well, like I think open queue in an ideal world is better for all the reasons listed. Better queue times. You have the flexibility to play what you want. People bring this up as
I just think the core like thing behind me, and it's been behind like all my takes, is I'll always bias towards the thing that makes the most amount of variety of interesting things in the game. Like, so that's just a core belief that I have, that improves the game in some way, shape, or form, and everything that takes away from that is probably bad
as well. And I guess I'll just touch up on this. People being just people out there saying like, oh, you know, there's more creativity. I'm like, I guess, but at the end of the day, it's like I think that's maybe a bit of an overrated point. Mostly it just comes down to the fact that you have to contend with imbalanced lobbies, and that will happen. And
imbalanced lobbies.
There are going to be some negative experiences due to imbalanced lobbies, but at the same time, I think because the player base has been more conditioned to play balanced lobbies, given that we've just been so conditioned from years and years worth of role queue to play those compositions, because that's what we're used to now.
It's not really true though, is it? Like, it's not really true that you're saying we've been conditioned to play 2-2-2 when we've been playing 1-2-2 for this entire time. I mean, sure, kind of, but like, really? Like, are you sure?
We being the
or before were people playing more DPS because there were 15 DPS and 8 tanks? Like,
play base. I mean, I think if you're a high level player, you always understood this, but now you just needed to psychologically condition the rest of the player base to go along with that, and they have. You get better experience, ironically, in open queue after having years and years of forced role queue.
Is that true? Like, I feel like people just like tank because tank is fun and has a increased variety. I don't think people have been, obviously to a degree, people know more about the game and therefore are more likely to flex. But people's willingness to flex hasn't really been increased by their knowledge. People's willingness to flex increases by the amount they want to win the game for the most part. And sure, when you increase the knowledge, people's understanding of how to win the game goes up. But I don't remember anywhere in like 2018 people misunderstanding that triple DPS was a good comp or not. People just didn't want to play tank, right? Sure, the misunderstanding's gone onwards, and in bronze it's definitely filtered down as time has gone on, but I don't see that being the main driver behind these things. I think the actual, like, this is just, I get what he's saying and I kind of agree, yeah, but he's trying to explain the higher amount of tank players. You see the weaseling here. He's trying to explain the high amount of tank players by saying that people still don't want to play tank, but people have just learned what to play. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to explain why people actually like playing tank in 6v6 and trying to explain away the fact that the queue times are absolutely fine by moving the conversation to people's understanding of the game. I don't think that's true. I think people just like playing tank now as well. Like, sure, it's a factor, but people like playing tank. If people don't like playing tank, they'll throw regardless. People knowing that not playing tank is throwing has increased, but people would still throw.
Because you've been
ironically, now that people know that not playing tank is throwing, like, I don't know,
forced to learn that no, you should play a balanced team comp, even though it should have been obvious from day one. So yeah, in an ideal world,
it was obvious for day one. I don't remember anyone thinking that triple DPS was good. Anyone remember that? Like, back in like 2017, 2018, I think people understood that double tank was the way to play the game from the start. Sure, like, it's all in degrees. You go into a bronze lobby, you go into a silver lobby, maybe not. Oh, the third DPS thought 3 DPS was good. Exactly, and they were purposely throwing most of the time. Like, if you go to gold at any point in Overwatch's lifespan beyond the first 6 months, I think people knew that triple DPS and 1 support was bad, and 1 tank was bad.
Actually have this take for both 6v6 and also open queue. In an ideal world,
Just people's willingness to flex has increased.
Someone's going to clip that, I'm sure. But an ideal world requires, the negative aspects of that to not be so existing, which is that people swaying the lobby into something super weird with, like, not enough, maybe you don't even get a tank, or you only get 1 tank, it doesn't feel good, or you don't get enough supports or whatever, or a 6v6 situation where people just like pick insanely wrong heroes with negative synergy, which I think is more of a negative than it could be in the same situation in 5v5. Not to say it doesn't exist in 5v5. It's along the same lines of the argument I always make of where, like,
it's a classic. It's more negative than it should be. I don't think that's true. I think, as I've said multiple times, 5v5 has had 3 years development to try and reduce this issue. 6v6 has had 0 seconds of development to try and reduce the issue with bad combinations.
Highs are high, but the lows are lower. And I say the same thing for 5v5, 6v6 as I do for open queue versus role queue. But I think for 6v6, open queue is required.
I was in the trenches of 2018 silver open queue, and there was quite a bit of convincing people to try out triple DPS, and it always went bad. So did people actually think triple DPS was good? Oh, it's just guys we know this dog shit. Okay, so they didn't know. They just, yeah, again, it was just people trying to make people not throw.
Because you need to mitigate the queue times. And if you were to implement role queue, as much as I think it would be better, on average, the experience would be better to like have, a fixed amount of roles to make it a balanced lobby. You will just simply get way too high queue times because
But Avril, people are playing 2-2-2. You just said that.
Won't be enough tanks. They just simply won't. I don't think you can make people want it. You can't make people want.
So Avril's take is basically people have been educated to the point where they know that 2 tanks are good, and therefore the only reason that people are playing tanks is because tanks are necessary. It's still the same take. There's no admission that tank is an enjoyable role. There's no admission that the variants and types of things you can do on tank has increased over time. There's no admission that the types of people that want to play tank or the tank player base has increased over time in general. The idea is just people won't queue for that. Do you know what? I don't play tank in 6v6 open queue. Do you know why? Because I can't guarantee that I have another tank with me. If I could guarantee another tank with me, I'd lock 6v6 as role queue.
Vanilla ice cream. This is the other problem with the analogy that Jeff had. It's like, oh, maybe we just got to supply more vanilla. I was like, dude, if people just don't like vanilla, it doesn't matter how much you supply vanilla. Okay, you can't force
That was his point, Avril. What? Did he just misunderstand the analogy?
people to like vanilla. Make it, make it vanilla choc chip. I don't know, do something else with it, because you can't just like.
Yeah, so he's agreeing with Jeff, right? He just misunderstood that analogy entirely. The analogy is that DPS is vanilla and people like DPS, so you can't change that. So he's just agreeing with him that people don't like tank and you can't change that, right? So he just agreed with the analogy we all agreed that is bad on this podcast like half an hour ago. Am I going insane? I think you and Avril just come down to a fundamental disagreement about what you find fun about the game. It's pretty clear to me that Avril is 100% a big mechanics and big DPS style tank fan, and would rather the game go in that honestly pretty shitty homogenized direction. Yeah, 100%. I think he's fine with the homogenization. I think he sees tank as a fundamental issue that can't be solved, and therefore you have to do whatever you need to it. But never does he touch the argument. This is so weird, right? Does anyone call him out on this?
You can't just like flood the game with like, let's put like 10 more tanks and no other roles and everyone will play tanks. Like, well,
But that's what we did, and it's worked. Are you crazy? Did you not see the results? Are we looking at different things than the devs saying the average queues for tank, DPS, and supports were all under 3 minutes average for the test when they did the roll-lock test? And we're not seeing now when everyone's picking 2-2-2. Sure, obviously some of that's going to be people are trying to win and people know how to win. But people definitely want to play tank more than they did previously. Are you saying there's no effect? Are you saying that like you'd have to have 2 times the amount of tanks as the amount of DPS in order to get people to play tank? Okay, there's a question for everyone. If there was the same amount of tanks, DPS, and supports, and the same amount of variance in the role, so interesting things to try out, they were diverse, they were interesting, do you think people would split evenly between the roles? I guess that's it. He sees tank that way because he's under the impression that just find tank unfun the way he does. There's nothing wrong with disliking Overwatch tank, but I feel like he doesn't see the vision of why people possibly find it fun. So he thinks they just need to go. Yeah, but that's him. That's him with his Reinhardt and his Winston take, right? The Reinhardt and Winston take's crazy to me. He's like they're not interesting, and I'm like they're the most interesting, like so utterly interesting compared to the others.
if tank just fundamentally isn't that fun for people because the role just fundamentally isn't that interesting.
You talk. You interrupt him. Somebody call this out. What the fuck is he talking about?
And I don't just mean in Overwatch, I just mean generally in gaming, tank is always the
Well, in World of Warcraft, people don't like tanking. People don't like tanking in World of Warcraft, therefore it's true and applicable in every single scenario. Oh, but in MOBAs as well. MOBAs are also a game that has tank. I'm pretty sure tank is a thing in World of Tanks, and people don't like tank in World of Tanks. It's got tank in the name. As long as it has tank in the name, it's the same as everything else.
pick role. There's not much you can do about that. So I don't know. I just think OpenQ right now is the best for 6v6 and should probably stay for 6v6.
Somebody, please.
One thing I'll add here, and then we'll take it to Spilo, just reflecting on this, and actually the
Nobody?
last podcast I did with
Put your fucking hands
Marvel
up,
Rivals,
guys.
is that I think another facet here could be the competitiveness of the game, because I think it, undoubtedly, like back then, Overwatch was much more casual. Overwatch then was what arguably Marvel Rivals was, and even more, right? It was even more popular, I think. Then.
This is why we lose. This is why we lose. Because you guys have nothing to say for some reason. Like, this is why we lose.
Than what Marvel Rivals is today. And the guys on the Marvel Rivals podcast were saying that it's a mess in terms of the open queue. Like, people pick all kinds of crap for the majority of the ranks. But when you get to the absolute highest end, people stop trolling, right? They're like, okay, well, I want to win this game, so I will flex. I will participate in a somewhat sane comp. And I wonder if that's a facet taking place here in Overwatch, where it's like now we're going back to 66, but the community overall who are playing are much more competitive, right? They're much more invested in the game. They're not just someone logging on to be like, I just want to play.
Sure.
I don't give a shit what's going to happen. I don't give a shit like what you guys are picking. I'm just going to pick my hero. Fuck you, right? And that's kind of what we see a little bit in Marvel
Can I chime in on
Rivals,
that?
right? Yeah, go ahead.
Extremely quickly. I think that has more to do with the age of the game than the type of people that play the game. Now, I will say, I'm not going to dive super deep into Marvel versus Overwatch here, but like, yes, Marvel a more casual game? Yes, but it's not so much more casual that like you just get like people that just have zero clue
See, agreed. Have a good one, dude.
playing the game all the time, maybe in the super low ranks. But the point I'm trying to make here, and I'll make it super quick, is that because Overwatch is an older game, you have a more mature play base that's played through the game. Now, do we still get people that come into Overwatch that will just like not give a crap at all and pick whatever, just do whatever they want if they're extremely new to the game?
He's saying that all of the progress we've made in terms of tank queue is literally just understanding. And nobody is pushing back on that. That a significant amount of the the improvement has been made through variety. Did everyone else just misunderstand that Jeff analogy? We were literally calling him wrong half an hour ago, and then Avril was like, Jeff's so right, guys. Look at that analogy, that he was fun and interesting. You can't change player base, like what player bases want by changing the numbers. That's stupid. You just make more DPS. Making more tanks won't increase the tank numbers. What are you talking about? We literally just discussed this. Why aren't you calling him out?
Anyone that's stuck in the game for a reasonable amount of
What are we on here? Why is the word debate
time,
here?
the game is more figured out. Everyone knows to some degree what you're supposed to do in this game. Not only is the play base more mature in the actual age sense, but it's matured in the sense of like the game is more solved. And because the game is more solved, there are more distinctions of this is the correct way to play the game, and these are the incorrect ways to play the game. And when your game is new and novel, those things just aren't as obvious. Obviously, if you're an experienced player, if you're an Overwatch experienced player going to Marvel, you reach a higher rank, those things are intrinsically just coming towards you from a knowledge side, because you just know that from experience. But if you're like a newer player and you don't know what you're supposed to do, then yeah, it's gonna be chaos in Marvel Rivals, obviously. And so this is why I go back to the point of like, because we've been conditioned to play role queue for so many years for the average player base, they now have a better knowledge and understanding of what they're supposed to do, even in an open queue situation.
Guys, do you think the Marvel Rivals players know that they'll lose if they play non-2 tank? Do you think they have any fucking illusions as to whether it is good to play non-2 tanks unless they have specifically a Stranger or Magneto? No. They know. They all know. They fucking don't care. They want to play their role. The reason why people want to play Overwatch on the roles isn't just because they want to win in 6v6 suddenly, right? Isn't just because they now know how to win. They all know how to win in Rivals as well. It's because they want to play that role. What?
The Marvel, because it's so new, it's not going to have that. You have to like have enough time and conditioning of the average player base to get to that level. So I think it's just a time factor there.
I think after Gold and Rivals, people know exactly what they should be doing. And I think even below Gold, the majority of people know 2 tanks. Like you put yourself into a silver game, I bet you if you pick no tanks, people are going to be typing that we need 2 tanks 100% of the time. Maybe they won't type it, but they'll certainly think it, but still.
All right, I'm going to take it to Spilo next. Spilo, give your thoughts. I'm just going to go to the bathroom, but I can hear, so go ahead and tell me what you think.
I think there's like 2 points here I kind of want to talk about.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and he did phrase it really nicely. Yeah, the frame of reference attack shooters and FPS, but he's a specialist on this type of game. It's all he's done for most of his career. Like, how does he not like the same game that I like? That's just the question. Like, how he's so far away from me in what the game is and how it plays and what he enjoys. Why is he in the hero-based shooter genre if he doesn't like the diversity in the hero shooter genre? It's kind of crazy.
Both of which we talked a great deal about, which is kind of the open queue format and, you know, whether it's better or worse. I think unquestionably the thing that's a bit overrated, as Avril touched on, is the compositional variety and the flexibility. It's something I kind of poked at with Rivals a few months back, where everyone's like, well, Rivals needs open queue because you can express your creativity, but ultimately it's just 2-2-2, and it will be 90% of the time. And the situations when it's not 2-2, it's really toxic. So I think
express your creativity to throw the game. Yeah,
it's an interesting thing for a hero pool standpoint, as you were saying, Hawk, where it's like you have a Kirikou Diva pool, right? Like that's weird. That's something that you can really do in an open queue format. But I don't think that is super important. What I think is underrated, which we've talked about, but I think really, really is underrated, is queue times. And I think the Marvel Rival development has kind of proven that, is that people will even willingly put up with the garbage matchmaking that is Marvel Rivals in the ring system for an instant queue. They just don't care. Like people, it's better for content because you're not staring at queue time. It's better for the player.
I think under 3 minutes is absolutely fine. Like under 3 minutes is absolutely 100% fine. Under 4 minutes is good. Under 5 minutes is a little bit edgy. Under 6 minutes is too far, right? If you are streaming, you go to the toilet and do other things for 3 minutes between games. That is an absolutely fair amount of time to yap and entertain your audience. Absolutely fine. Yeah, like if you have to wait for 2 more minutes, if you don't wait for 30 seconds, if you wait for 2 minutes 30 in order to get into a match and it's got better quality, sure, that won't be easily quantifiable for you, but I think in the long run, you will much more enjoy the 2 minutes 31.
It's better for engagement. It's just everything that can possibly be said about short queue times. It amplified it by 10 times. It's not important enough, which is tough, right? Because we all love the, we want the perfect matchmaking, perfect this and that, but ultimately long queue times it kills games. It just kills games. It doesn't look good for optics.
What long queue times? Are the long queue times in the room with you right now? How is nobody still willing to argue this after all this time, with so many different bits of data telling us that the queue times are more or less fine? They're not great, they're not perfect, but they're more or less fine. What do you think they're going to be? I think the most the queue time would be is 5 minutes or less. right? That 5 minutes or less for one of the roles. And I think the thing is, it's pretty much split 50-50 between DPS and supports, which is going to make it a little bit more even.
Because it doesn't look good for streams. It's just terrible. And it especially is harmful from a content perspective because the people that suffer from longer queue times are the people that are doing the content, right? So you guys are the higher ranked players and you're suffering from that. So the reason
There's definitely diminishing returns as you go from 5 minutes to lower, right? If you go to 4 minutes and 3 minutes, nobody notices a difference between 1 minute 30 and 10 seconds. It doesn't matter at that point. So there is a kind of like a level that you want to leave it at where that's fine.
This is why I think this whole open queue format thing is awkward, is because we have a little bit of a survivorship bias where you notice there's like a very high correlation. And I know this because I've spent so much time with the
Yeah, disappointing us by taking the Giga defeaters queue times attitude. It's really weird, isn't it? Like 4 minutes or under is a little bit high. 3 minutes or under, absolutely fine. I don't think anyone's going to be turned off the game for 3 minutes or under. In fact, do you know what it is? It's when you buy a hot dog and they just take the hot dog off and put it on your thing if you don't see a big cut. It's like if you go to a really shitty pub, right? A really shitty pub that only serves microwave meals, right? If they take 20 minutes to prepare your meal, you probably think it's better than if they took 30 seconds to do it. It's pretty simple. It's a psychology thing. They instantly queue it, and it's bad every single time. You'll think they don't care.
the plats, coaching plats, working with plats, talking with gold players, right? And there's a very strong correlation between higher ranked players and a favorable opinion on OpenQ and lower ranked players and a hostile relationship with OpenQ. And it's because you described it SVV with Marvel Rivals, you don't really experience the downsides of OpenQ as much at the highest ranks because people aren't stupid. And so when you go in, you go, like, I tune into Samito's YouTube stream, my guy's playing Mantis, you know what I'm saying? Or he's playing freaking...
But we can just address this by it's this idea that the only thing that's working is nobody likes tanks. It's an indisputable fact of the world that nobody likes tanks, and therefore the only thing we can do is make people more aware that not playing tank will lose them the game. And the only reason why anyone would ever play a tank, because tank is an inherently boring thing that nobody wants to do, is specifically only because they want to win, right? That's just this weird like fantasy world we're living in, and I don't know how we got here and how this guy around here and this guy down here are both okay with it.
You know, strange, you know, like whatever is needed. You're gonna play DPS whenever you can, and most of the time people are gonna let you play duelist. But what needs to get done gets done, and that kind of mindset is why you're a higher ranked player, right? Gold players don't care that much. Not that they don't care at all, but they don't care as much. Otherwise, they wouldn't be gold. So like, there's this real danger here. Maybe I'm being a little bit facetious, but we have to be really careful about, like, we're all, I've worked at the highest level. We've all worked or played or coached or whatever at the highest level. But like, my experience is not the majority of Overwatch players. You know what I'm saying?
Spider's right there. Like, the gold players are more willing to throw by playing triple DPS, but they know that triple DPS is throwing. So why in OpenQ 6v6 are people playing 2-2 in gold rank when that hasn't changed at all? It's because they want to play it.
Your experience is not the majority of Overwatch players. And so I think like we could sit here and definitely, but our experiences are limited and they're going to influence our opinion on OpenQ. I'm not saying it's not possible, just think that's something we have to be sensitive to. And I think piggybacking off of that, in fact, I think these are very closely correlated, is we do have to look at hero design. Sam, we talked about this a great deal, about 5v5, 66 hero design is the end all, be all, right? Because, you know, you talk about, when people talk about why 66 is so cancer, we talk about Winston Roadhog. Oh, I hate playing with the Roadhog. What's the problem? Is it the format or is it freaking Roadhog? When people talk about solo tank and 5v5, you know, is it the format? Maybe, but Malga's Malga. You know, you put Malga in 66, he sucks at 66 too. He's terrible, right? And I think that's kind of...
No, he's fine. He just needs some changes. If you transition to rogue queue, you get more people like you and Tiefling who like that structure enough to be put off by open queue. Yeah, I mean, to me, open queue is just rogue queue, but with more bad experiences and no upside. I understand the upside of being able to flex. I think that is a good upside. I think the ability to play triple support is always interesting. I toxically find triple support metas playing against them incredibly boring, but I find playing them quite fun because it's a new way of playing the game. But that's something that I get from it that I think reduces the quality of the game in general.
The problem here is that when we talk about hero design, you have to be really attentive to what heroes feel good in 5v5, what heroes feel good in 66, and you'll often find a very close correlation between a lot of them. That's not always true. We talked about the off tank and how off tank doesn't exist in 5v5, but tell you what,
100% always queue tank in 6v6 if it was rogue queue though. Like, I 100% will. Tank is boring because tanks are strong, so enemy team will most likely try to immediately counter you to deny you your big value. Place him or soldier, it's rare to see someone try and counter you. Yeah, of course. But if you play any tank that can be countered, enemy team will choose to cheese you out. Yeah. Solution: nerf the tanks to be at the same power level as other heroes, so the countering tank does not deny so much value. Of course, yeah. That's always been it. Yeah. No, you're entirely right.
But tanks that those Junker Queens, those hazards, feel good in 66, they feel good in 5v5. And that's consistently across the board there. And so I think like the reason why that is actually can be very closely correlated to OpenQ, and careful, this is where I was cooking all of this, right? The real problem with OpenQ is that one of the things that people talk of is like having the 4 Moira Mercy mains. I made a tweet about it yesterday.
Your main role is tank? Yeah, I like tank more than any of the other roles, yeah. I am a support player because 5v5 tank is god-awful. 6v6 tank, before we were able to play it, was god-awful because it was double shield or other things like that. I've always liked tank more. Yeah, I've always liked tank more than others. I always gravitate towards it. I just never get to play it because there's never an enjoyable way of playing it, right? Like, they've never made it the experience like compelling enough for me to be able to play it.
Got to a game, insta-lock Mercy, insta-lock Lifeweaver, insta-lock Moira. I'm like, all right, well, triple support's good, just not those supports, right? And the problem is I can't ask them to swap because what can a Moira player play? What can a Mercy player play?
Well, careful.
Right? And like,
Careful.
you know, right? So
this is him, not me.
But this is a hero design issue because part of the strength of an OpenQ format is your ability to flex and to play different characters as needed. Not a 50,000 hero pool, just a couple different characters depending on the situation. If you're one-tricking Mercy, you do not have any transferable skills compared to other characters. And the same thing goes for Moira. And the same thing goes for Bastion. You know, and Torbjorn one-tricks back in 2018, right? You just have a very niche skill set. I'm not saying that your character is completely devoid of skill necessarily. It's just a
Non-issue in 6v6 comp, players are generally good at self-regulating, especially if they want to win. They're outliers, but I will take that over having 10+ minute queue times in Masters and above. Okay, but what informs you that the queue times are going to be 10+ minutes in Masters and above? I think that's the disagreement there, right? What tells you that that is true?
a very, very niche character without transferable mechanical skills. Mechanics are the most important transferable skills.
Because I agree with you entirely. 10+ minute queue times in Master and above for DPS and support because the tank queue is lacking is a non-goer, right? It's completely non-goer. But yeah, what tells you that that is true?
Overwatch. Nobody says, oh, positioning. Shut up. It's mechanics. And that's the problem. One of the problems with the OpenQ format, and it's why hero design is so important, because if you can design more Kirikos, more Lucios, more Hazards, more whatever, fill in the blank, you could play even Juno, right? Like you have a character that does require some level of dynamic positioning, you know, aim, cooldown management. You do those things. You're not going to be a great tank player, but you'll have some familiarity with how to move your crosshair and shoot. And so I think whether we talk about OpenQ or Roll Q or 5.5 or 66, this is why I've always been the hero design guy, because those outliers poison the well for everybody. When everyone thinks about what sucks about 5v5, they think about the Amalgamators, Season 8.
Into the middle, into the middle, into the middle, into the middle. Nothing interesting can exist in your video game. No, spoiler, you don't do that. You just don't. Like, it's fine. It doesn't matter. It's fine. Like, decreasing the variety of things that can exist does not make you the hero design guy. That's boring. That's just boring. Why would we do that? One more time, Spilo. Let me just go back and double check.
One of the problems with the OpenQ format, and it's why hero design is so important, because if you can design more Kirikos, more Lucios, more Hazards, more whatever, fill in the blank, you can play.
Oh man. The take that you need some sort of aiming and positioning skill, otherwise you have no transferable skills, is fine. But like, why can't we? Why can't we have characters with no transferable skills? How can you say that having Mercy mains is so toxic to the game that Mercy should not exist in the current form? How can you do that? Like, how it's fine. Yeah, talking about the dynamism with positioning more than generalism mechanics. He's talking about positioning and aiming, definitely. He's talking about transferable skills to other heroes, and if he's targeting down Mercy, he's specifically talking about aiming and positioning there. The trouble is Mercy's positioning skill got completely taken away by her super jump being made really easy. So that's just a non-thing. There's no mechanical skill in Mercy anymore because they removed it when Overwatch 2 got launched for no reason in particular, which no Mercy mains talk about because I don't know. I actually don't know why they don't talk about it.
Even Juno, right? Like you have a character that does require some level of dynamic positioning, you know, aim, cooldown management. You do those things. You're not going to be a great tank player, but you'll have some familiarity with how to.
Mercy requires knowledge of when characters' pressure cycles are up and down, and how, like, what characters need support to a higher degree than other characters. Therefore, the transferable skills on them transfer poorly because most characters require aim, and I'd say you should probably diversify the amount of supports that don't require aim in order to get there to the types of characters that can do big bursts in order to be able to support people at the time that matters. Okay, you should diversify the Mercy role. You should diversify the non-aim, maybe non-positioning, but knowledge about timing role more. That's my opinion.
Move your crosshair and shoot. And so I think whether we talk about OpenQ or Roll Q or 5.5 or 66, this is why I've always been the hero design guy, because those outliers poison the well for everybody. When everyone thinks about what sucks about 5v5, they think about the Amalgamators, Season 8. When everyone thinks what sucks about 66, we think about the Roadhog, Diva, off-tank attack, and Eichenwald first moments, or freaking double shield, right? You know, we think of those hero design outliers that just ruin.
What? So just hero design outliers? They're not the design outliers. They're the balance outliers. What do you mean by a non-positioning hero? I mean a hero that doesn't have demand on micro-positioning or macro-positioning. So where you stand on the map doesn't matter, and where you stand in terms of the moment-to-moment, back and forth, small positioning doesn't matter. Mercy's quite forgiving on positioning because they have an instant correction button, and they're quite, macro-positioning, and they're quite forgiving on micro-positioning because they can instantly move out of the position if they're threatened with one button.
Everybody's opinion of those things. So that's my spiel.
Well,
There's no difference between a Mercy with a spreadsheet of who to pocket and a Mercy that fundamentally understands the game. I don't think that's true. I think that Mercy is quite contextual, and just because you don't see the value that you get from having damage boost and healing in exactly the right place at exactly the right time does not mean there's any different. I'd say Mercy operating optimally in bronze with bronze level players is operating about I'd say about 30% better, but I think that 30% better than a Mercy that isn't scales with the DPS and the tanks as they do things more interestingly. So Mercy always rides a skill curve in an interesting way. And the idea is, well, if a Mercy was good enough in bronze versus good enough in GM, and they're doing more or less the same things, they won't be doing necessarily the same things because they have the timing. And what is worse, we keep nerfing the ceiling of the hero because she became wheelchair accessible. Nerfing the ceiling? I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like the depth on Mercy really should be put into the movement like it was before, and having that be mechanically demanding and require tech and timing and require thought about where you are going instead of being able to turn around 180. Like, I think Mercy's new movement is completely toxic. The fact that you can aim a direction, press spacebar, and go there is awful. Before you committed to a direction, and therefore you had to know about your macro positioning and your micro positioning, and you had to have the mechanics in order to be able to operate with the correct level of super jump in order to get up to the high ground or down from the high ground exactly the right moment in order to flutter. You just can't bring it back at this point because the game is so mobility crap. Well, obviously not in a one-to-one, but you could buff other things about Mercy kit in order to make it. Even with current super jump, so many divers can still keep up with Mercy. Sure, I think that's its own problem. I think in 6v6, Mercy can survive a lot better against those divers with the amount of peel available. I think you're probably extrapolating from 5v5 there.
I'll add one.
A little bit, at the very
This
least.
is my new tagline. I'll add one quick thing, guys. I'll add Hazard to that list as well, because I know I can just see the comments from here, guys. Is people say, oh yeah, well Hazard was meta for like 5 months, guys. It's like, okay, guys, Hazard is an amazingly designed hero.
He's not. He's a badly designed hero. He's fine, don't get me wrong. He has design space, but he's certainly not interestingly designed. I don't think anyone would say he's interesting. He requires skill. He has a good skill to value curve, but the things that he does are oppressive to the rest of the game in ways that stale out positioning and stop people standing in interesting places. And the general gameplay loop is quite boring on the hero. He's just not well designed. I don't get where this take comes from.
It's an amazingly designed hero, but it doesn't mean that it can't be overpowered. And it being overpowered in meta for a long time has more to do with like the numbers and the raw, like, you know,
I talked
of the
about
character. Yeah, it's like how much damage or how much with the cooldowns. Like the raw stats of the character can be too high, yes, but that doesn't mean the character.
One of the awkward things with Hazard is Hazard has a lunge that can go across the map, right? If Hazard can go across the map in order to be able to lunge at you, should he be able to threaten to kill you? That's the question. That's a breakpoint that we're just letting hang there. Okay, so how do we stop Hazard being able to kill you across the map? So first off, we can make it so that Hazard is punished if he goes for a kill that's too deep. So we can balance the cooldown so Hazard can't get to you, or we can make it so that Hazard can't stand on main. Okay, so Hazard's not being able to stand on main really isn't an option. So Hazard is always going to be threatening this area around him. And also allowing Hazard to be punished doesn't matter, because if Hazard can still kill you and yeet himself at you, you're still going to stop standing in that position if you have a chance of dying, even if you're going to win the match at a low level based off of him feeding. It's just one of those things which is just like, yeah, just mechanically satisfying and difficult, which gets people, myself included, to really enjoy his design. But yeah, I get you. I don't like aiming. Is that crazy? Like, I don't like aiming. Like, I'm fine. I don't need it. I don't think every single character should demand aim. It's not that I think Hazard is worse for the fact that he has to aim. That's not it. It's not that I wouldn't play Hazard because of it. It's that I feel like Hazard is this skill to value curve creep that has happened on every single character as time goes along, where every single character has to have an aggressive skill curve. Or you make heroes that specifically deny breakpoints, which are Brig/Cast and our pugs. Yeah, that works. Obviously that works, but that's been removed from the game in 5v5 and 6v6.
It's poorly designed. So anyone, because I know it's going to come in the comments, people are like, oh yeah, well,
Hazard has the highest brawl, the highest sustain, the highest
Hazard was just
mobility.
meta for 3 months.
Hazard is just stupid. They forgot to add weakness.
Guys, and it's like, yes, because it was overtuned. That doesn't mean it's not well designed.
I think it's badly designed. Why do I always have controversial opinions?
Well designed character can be
And he's not-
overtuned.
and- Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so that's what I just want to make sure that people understand that like Hazard is an example of one of the best tank designs in the game, just happened to be overtuned.
I just don't think that's true. It's badly designed because it does too much of every single thing. Yeah, the idea that Hazard is well designed but has a bad balance is kind of beside the point, because the balance is the design at a certain point. If you reduce Hazard's ability to jump across the map and insta-kill someone, you have nerfed Hazard. If you reduce his ability to stand on main and brawl up the tank, you've nerfed Hazard. All of these different things at the same time are part of the design, because the design is fundamentally changes significantly based on the balance. If you say, you know what, we're going to make it so Hazard can't kill people with a lunge, I would say, great, but that's kind of like what the character did. And now the character does nothing. The actual way that you should nerf Hazard is to decrease the range of the lunge, but nobody wants to have that conversation because that's boring.
And those things, like, we shouldn't, like, we being the Overwatch community, because I know the people on this panel are going to be fine, but it's the people out there that listen to this, they'll bring it up. Because we all know Malga is the real outlier in terms of bad design. Malga is a character that no matter what you do with the guy, fundamentally, the design just doesn't...
Fixed it. I fixed it. It's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. I fixed it. I fixed it, guys. Guys, I fixed it.
allow him to be healthy in the game. So I'm just backing up everything Spyro said, and saving everyone's brain cells later from the deranged Hazard comments that will be there.
Don't, to anybody listening to this, don't make the same, I don't want to say mistake that I did, but like, don't come to the
First time chat, Hazard is good. Offers no explanation.
wrong conclusion, or like make sure you really ask yourself the question, because like, when I started playing against the tanks that I hated in 5v5 against 6v6, even like Sigma, Hawk, I like your cat.
I do agree with Realish. Malga is more interesting to play against than Hazard. Isn't that crazy? Right? Yeah.
It's just I just went around over there. But like, don't misconstrue design with like just overall sustain. Because like, correct me if I'm wrong, but when Hazard was like his big meta or whatever, he still had 25% headshot reduction. He still had like the super armor, like the reduced ult charge, like all that stuff. Like I'm telling you guys, there's a reason why I was so irritated at that and so vocal against it, because it is that good regardless of design. So don't like try to play against these characters or these tanks that you hate, like in 6v6 or in 5v5 open queue if you have a custom code for that. But like, don't conflate bad design with giga stats, because they're too, the giga stats actually overpower the healthy design that is the type of character that you want to make.
I don't think Hazard has healthy design. I think the distance that Lunge can travel and the amount of space that the Lunge can stale out from DPS, being able to stand in there safely, is boring. I think that's boring. I think that's bad. Good skill curve. Okay, yeah, everyone's going to say good skill curve. Yeah. More options to do stuff. Fits less into counter swap flowchart. More options to do stuff. I mean, yeah, you can just keep adding options to kits. What if I gave Reinhardt the ability to fly? Is that good design because you have more options? That also fits less into counter swap flowchart. And the fact that Ryan can fly now allows him to have a better skill curve because you have to use the flight properly, right? Primal, should we make it so Reinhardt can headshot with his hammer out of curiosity? Would that give him a better skill curve and give him more options to do stuff? Yes, give him. You're insane. Okay, that's okay. If you're welcome to tell me you're insane. I've disregarded your opinions from out loud.
I'm not gonna call anybody out, but there was a couple of tweets I saw about like, oh, 1 second nerf on Hazard's leap. Are you serious? And it's like, you guys need to go back and take remedial math. Like,
Well, that matters so much.
Is
Like,
1
when
second and a 4 second cool.
That is a yes, by the way. Yeah, the charge up lunge would be fine. It would have to have a really good telegraph on the charge up. Yeah.
You remember when they did that to DPS Doomfist and he was just terrible?
Yeah, we did that a month ago, but we gave him the ability to not do other things as a result, right? We took away the brawl as for the dive, right? Like it wasn't a 1-for-1. We just added flying. We put the flight into there to allow him to be able to do a different type of thing and reduce his health pool significantly so he can't stand in brawl for as long.
And then tank team too. It's in tank team. I'm like, wow, like this hero feels so much different now. Once I got punch.
Gavin,
And by the way, it was okay. I was talking about as an addition to the kit, obviously, and you guys are all well actuallying me because you think you're all smart, but no, you'll get what I'm actually talking about.
Twitch chat at one point, he said his win rate dropped by like 3% off of that 1 second nerf.
Yeah,
Something
it's
crazy
yeah.
like that. He got like, and it's like, and people are like saying, oh, he's brain dead because you could just pick him. Like, guys, it's the same thing that Avril said. Like the difference between like overtuned versus badly designed. Like people cannot understand the difference, and it leads to so much.
I just think these people are talking absolute bollocks. Just absolute bollocks. Just I don't get this. Like overtuned and badly designed. If the tuning allows them to do things which they couldn't otherwise do, that is part of the design. That's it. Right? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? Run should not be the standard anymore. It should be Winston. Okay, sure. What if we made Winston's right click able to headshot people? Would that improve the would that make Winston a better character? Out of curiosity, just to like litmus test where you are, right?
Much bad feedback. So much bad feedback.
I'll wait for the
The launch is so broken, but
Spider,
he did.
people say it's not enough of a nerf. You know why? Oh, it's such a bad nerf, guys. It doesn't do anything. You know why? Because 1 is a small number. You forget for the average player out there, for the average Overwatch player there. Oh,
Yeah.
but 1 second, 1 is a very small number, Spider. What
if we gave Winston a mini game where every single time he jumped into the enemy team, he had to play a round of Osu in order to work out how much damage he did to the enemy team? Would that make Winston better? Because I've heard that Osu takes quite a lot of skill, guys.
can't count? 1 is the first number when you count. It's 1.
Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
Duh.
Well, they
1,
also
guys, it's a
nerfed
small
his
number.
block. They nerfed his block, and then like a week later or 2 weeks later, they also nerfed his 1 second leap and whatever. And I was like, also, it's like, I don't know. It is what it is. People, it's not a big surprise. But again, I guess that's my point. Is like with the open queue format, it's important to have the character designs like Hazard because you understand mobility and you understand cooldown management and mechanics and target priority and stuff like that. And so like
You have to understand the entire game in order to play him. Therefore, he's well designed. No, he just had everything in his kit. What is okay? I guess the question is, what is the core thing that we started from Hazard and we built out from, and that was interesting. Now I'm going to say that Hazard was built out from the block. Obviously, that's what the dev said. So how do you build on this block ability in the most refined way to make this the core of the kit? Well, you do that by having it like how much resource demand do you want the block to have? Let's up or down the damage reduction to it. Do you want the block to be radial? Do you want it to only be in front? That changes how you kind of play with it. Adding the insta kill to the kit with the left click takes away from the block. Adding the wall climb doesn't take away from the block necessarily. It's interesting. You have to have some stuff on top of it, but adding the wall doesn't really work with the block. Basically what we're doing, we're going block, then we're going, okay, we're going to block, then we need a lunge, but we need high ground control, so we need the wall climb, but it'd be in the wall climb and the lunge plays good with the block. And you see how far away we got from the core of the character that they were trying to design from the start. And they did say they started with the you feel like the leap of the core of this kit? I'm sure you do, but that's not what the dev said. The dev said it started with the block. If you think the leap is the core of the kit, you don't need the block in it. Or you don't need at least one other the moving parts. Remove slash from leap, make it easier to block while leaping, and increase block AoE while leaping. Yep, I'd be fine with that, yeah. I think the burst is the problem. I'm in favor of removing wall climb, but the wall climb works with the ice blocks. You can't remove that. Because it's all in a little line, right? It's all in a little
you don't
line.
have, and I'm really picking on Mercy Warrior players, and I do think that those guys are a bit overhated outside of the pro community. But I will say it's like it is really dangerous to have one-dimensional characters without transferable skills. That can kind of keep the thing down. And I think a lot of Mercy players, they don't even necessarily like the fact. Like,
I didn't think it's dangerous. I think that Mercy has just had all the transferable skills from her kit removed over time.
they would like to use their movement more. But anyway, that's all for today.
Something I would be very curious to see the data like separated by rank, separated by
Bible does it.
by like what comps are being played at what rank, like what kind of like games are
That would
being
be
lost
huge.
off spawn.
That would
Like
be
I want to see the trade off of like role queuing up here. Are people actually losing more games off spawn open queue, or is it just like a placebo thing?
Yeah.
I will say
Because
the
it could be
matchmaking.
fine.
Yeah, the matchmaking is low quality because they transferred 5v5 like open queue rank in the middle of the season after a rank reset. Like the matchmaking is a little like sus in that way. But I'm very curious like to see how it changes by rank and like what the outcome of that is.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that there's like
For me, stats wouldn't change much about the game, since most of my ideas about the game are theory crafting. But yeah, I like if I had the stats, I could test my theory crafting a bit more effectively.
and this is a theme I want to bring to the
I don't
couple
really
of
care.
points I want to bring up here. So there's a lot of like nuance and sometimes contradiction in the same point, which is that like with this Mercy example, it's like you can kind of argue both sides of it, right? You can say what Spilo has just said there, which is that like it's worse in open queue because like, well, partly you have more chances of having more Mercy and
Easy
Muram. Right? Like, so you can end up with 4. In roll queue, you can end up with 2 worse. So okay, you have Mercy Muram, it's a bad backline, but hey, you only had 2 of them. They're not 4 of them. You could also make the other argument though and say, well, if they're not like a pure one trick, the likelihood
the cooldown instead of resource would be good. Say Dan. Yeah.
they have a transferable hero somewhere else is greater in open, right? It's like maybe they play a little bit of diva. Like they may not play.
Hero.
Right, exactly.
Some
It's
people
like
just
You have
play.
to nerf him until he will get easily shit on by Ryan just because he's his favorite child here. I didn't use Ryan as an example because Ryan's my favorite tank. That's not why that's not why I mentioned Ryan.
The
Yes.
character, and that
Well,
is
that's what I'm
it.
saying. If they're not a pure one trick,
No.
right? If they're like a Mercy player
Yeah,
who does play tank sometimes and will play, I don't know, Reinhardt sometimes, the chance that they will actually flex to something else to make the game work is potentially there in open queue, as is the chance that you can make a really bad hero work more in theory. In theory, you could say, oh, we have a Mercy and a Moira player. Let's play 3 DPS or whatever. Like we have a Mercy player, let's play 3 DPS so that she can bounce around more and that leans into the Mercies. But of course, is that really happening in any meaningful way? Unlikely. We don't know. This, as Hawk said, we really don't know the data. The devs may know the data of like, this is what's happening here and there. And this I'll lead to the other point I want to ask you guys about as well, is that this is almost the paradox of the open queue roll queue, going back to the original question, going back to the Marvel Rivals comparison. Because we're kind of saying simultaneously it's better for the casuals and worse for the casuals, right? It's like it's better for the casuals because they don't want to think too hard about what they're playing. They just want to log on and play the hero, and that helps with queue times. But we're also saying actually that creates wonky comps that makes it worse for the casual, right? So it's like we can't quite marry the two. It's like, well, do they want to just play whatever they want? And I think the way I would summarize it, and then I'm going to take it to you guys, is like I remember when the 5v5
we create reasonable incentives to play all of the roles, and we more or less balance the incentives between the roles. The incentives being the characters and all other things like that, and then we give them role queues so they can't fuck around too much. That's pretty much it, in my opinion. I think anything off of 222 is a more negative experience, and the only benefit is the ability to flex and the ability to throw if you want to throw for open queue, in my opinion. And the rest of that is just queue times, and queue times can be solvable by addressing the queue times. What Mercy needs are more proactive options, some way to interact with enemy team. I mean, you can always say that, but that's just kind of like Mercy in general, right, Primal? Like, you can say Mercy needs to be a different character. You can say that characters that don't interact with the enemy team can't exist in general. But wouldn't it be more interesting if we could have a game where we found a way to make a character that doesn't interact with the enemy team work and have a healthy skill curve? Wouldn't it be more interesting if we could work Mercy to a way where they could have a skill curve that could interact only with their team? Instead of taking away a thing that you could potentially design in your game, wouldn't it be more interesting to keep that space open for something that you can put in your game, so you have a wider variance of stuff? No?
Switch happened. One of the most popular tweets I ever made was like something along, I can't remember, I'm going to have to paraphrase it now, but it's something along the lines of everyone loves two tanks until you have to be one of the people picking the two tanks. And I feel like that's how it is with like flexing in open queue, right? It's like everyone loves open queue until they're the one who has to flex off the thing they want to play.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Reedish, well, I went in here for a second great 6v6 debate, and what actually happened is everyone's shaking each other's hands, so I need to have somebody to disagree with. You see how it works?
So it's like
I
this
mean,
weird
it's like,
paradox.
who wants to play? Who wants two tanks? Everyone puts their hands up. Who wants to play tank? No one puts their hands up.
They're playing it! They're playing it, Avril! Right now! They're playing two tanks! What are you on about? They're playing two tanks. They're doing it. Avril, right now. Right now, go open queue. Okay, go open queue right now. You will get to. They'll be playing two tanks. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are the one tank comps in the 5 DPS comps in the room with you right now? What's happening here? Like, what is happening? I'm still salty they let Everett weasel out of answering Hawk's question. Let him weasel out of everything. My last 15 games of open queue, I've been playing D.Va. D.Va's amazing, dude. Yeah, D.Va's really fun. Just make sure you time the DM properly. DM at the best time. Yeah, the debate happened a day early, but we already had the data before now. People just ignored it the first time, right? That's pretty much what... And anyone that played the 6v6 open queue knows what was fucking happening. I'm sorry, like, people know. You just had to ask your stream, like, for one time to get what kind of, like, a comp we're getting. We're getting 222 every damn time, and maybe a triple support at the expense of a DPS. Nobody's playing one tank, they're always playing two tank. And you can say that's entirely because people want to win the game. Doubt it is. I think people just want to play tank because tank's so much better, and they just dismiss this for no reason in particular.
What's that
I
mean?
think you're more likely to get it though in open queue than you would be in roll
Support's more popular than DPS. I agree.
queue because people, you go back to the ice cream example. If I'm already going to get ice cream, might as well get something while I'm there. You know what I mean? Like if I'm trying to win the game, I'm going to flex to try to win the game. I'm not just going to run down the game. Maybe in quick list is a problem, but like if you
that's a shitty analogy, Hawk.
are making people specifically go get one flavor ice cream, and they're going to be upset when they have to do it. But like. I'm not describing this analogy, but like
Like
if you have some guy
playing the right role, you know?
Yeah,
Is it a better experience that they are like, all right, fine, I'll try it. And it's like, actually, it's not that bad. It's kind of fun. Or is it more like, oh, I'm always playing the role that I don't want to play because he's brain dead.
You know what it is,
goal two,
Philo?
DPS.
Do you guys remember when you were a kid? And
No.
there was that one time where everyone's like, you're not going to like Brussels sprouts.
Can we please get somebody on this show that likes playing tank? I don't even think Hawk likes playing tanks. He's not willing to argue for it. Can we get a tank player on here?
And your mom tells you it's popcorn and you eat it anyway, and then it's actually good. And now I like Brussels sprouts.
Probably
So
the worst analogy you probably could have come up with. You just say that you
listen,
like
I'm just
two
saying.
dudes, you're awesome.
I'm just saying.
You're telling this to the big Kale conspiracy man. Like, it is not
No,
going to
dude,
fly.
Big Kale, you're compromised, buddy. Big Kale. Big Kale makes all health. Big Brussels sprouts, Big Kale, and
Oh,
Big salsa
man.
water. You got to watch out for those three, man.
I'm compromised. I'm going to start. Never mind, actually. Too far.
Oh,
But-
last point. One thing I almost forgot. Sorry. Queue times, big stuff for high rank, not big stuff for low rank. You kind of get what I'm saying? So like there's this weird dynamism where it's
Yeah.
like, how
Yeah.
much is like the goal player care about the open queue being insta queue when it's already basically insta queue anyway? So it's
Oh, by the way, tank player bases at high ranks are always more healthy when the tank player base is good at high rank. Yeah, I know Hawk's a D.Va player, dude. I know Hawk is okay. But he's not exactly going to town on why playing tank is fun and why I enjoy playing certain types of tanks, right? Like Avril was there saying like, well, yeah, I don't enjoy tanks in general, kind of like, and that's basically what he's saying. And there's never any pushback.
It's like, dude, again, like, do they really care that much? I'm asking the uncomfortable questions that maybe that we don't have the answers to. And to back up Hawk's point, this is
What do you mean you're asking the uncomfortable questions? You're just asking a question that nobody's been talking about. Like nobody's addressed this. Yes, there is diminishing returns on queue times. If you get under 4 minutes, it doesn't really matter that much. 3 minutes is what it is. Like nobody's going to turn off a game for 3 minutes. Over 4 minutes, that's probably a little bit of a friction for people wanting to play the game. Over 5 minutes is a lot. So can we get the queue times under 3 minutes with roll queue with tanks? Primal, you still haven't said to me why you think that I think it was you, wasn't it? You still haven't said to me why you think that tanks are going to be was it you? No, it's Giraffe. Giraffe! Look at this, right? Look at this degenerate stuff, right? Open queue is a non-issue in 6v6 comp. From my experience so far, players are generally good at self-regulating, especially if they want to win. There are outliers, but I'll take that over having 10 plus minutes queue times in Masters and above. I instantly... Oh, sorry, that's by the chat today. I instantly responded to him, asking him why he thinks that the queue times are going to be 10 plus minutes for other roles if we're in rogue queue with 6v6, and he didn't bloody respond. One message, says this, doesn't explain, leaves. Excellent. Gets instantly responded to. Sorry, Primal, it wasn't you. My bad. You responded? I responded instantly. Why do you think the queue times are going to be over 10 minutes, dude? What do you mean?
why we need public stats, because you can know how often 222 is picked. Like they know it.
And to add on as well, to talk placebo and stuff, one, I agree 100%. Number two, one thing I think we've learned, I guess, from this conditioning, I guess, or like going really, if there's one thing Overwatch has done, it's learned lessons for sure. 100. Yeah. Like Overwatch has, I think, gone around the block on this stuff a lot more than some of the other games out there. But where some people say, oh, well, we didn't get 2 tanks, so we lost the game. Well, what's the alternative, right? And there's a lot of times where we've now gone to the alternative in 5v5 where it's like, okay, well, now my 1 tank that I waited 10 minutes for this game is picking Roadhog and not swapping. So now, like, I could have gotten a whole new game. So, like, that's also something.
So why didn't we do anything ever about specifically Roadhog? And maybe the Zarya Diva pairing, right? Those two. Those are the pain points. Why don't we just address them in any way, shape, or form ever, right? Why don't we just do that? Not strong stats data, but when the 222 format was out for quick play, constantly getting 8+ minute queue times. Longest was 16. As for the open queue test for 6v6 comp, longest was only 7. You got 8+ minute queue times, 16 minute. I didn't see a single person with those queue times during my time. I saw it reporting the higher queue times. Yeah, I'm genuinely quite. I saw it reporting the higher queue times, but then when you actually queued for it, it was about 2 or 3 minutes. It was when you first logged on, there was a different queue times for it, and they were inflated, right? Yeah, I think your account's broken, dude. Longest was 87 for the 6v open queue 7. What SR are you? I feel like I've got a good vertical slice of SRs in my audience to ask them. Might just have extremely different MMR for open queue and roll queue. Yeah. It could be that the one's inflated and one's not. I just haven't seen, like, genuinely, I just haven't seen that. Blizzard reported that the queue times on average, and that doesn't mean they didn't peak to higher, obviously, but the queue times for all roles on average was 3 or below. I'm around Masters 3 and 5. Because I was queuing at high diamond to low Masters there, and I wasn't getting anywhere near that. So Blizzard reported under 3 minutes average, which doesn't mean it's at the peaks or the high ranks or the low ranks. It's not worse. It just means on average, all ranks were under 3 minutes for the comp test. And now they've reported that everything's 222, which passes my kind of like my litmus test, right? Every game that I've been in terms of open queue has been 222. Yeah, I just don't know, dude. I think your rank might be bugging. I've tried to avoid bias in terms of, like, I purposely looked for people in order to ask them queue times. Obviously my audience is biased, but I don't think they'd lie to me as their queue times in order to make it better or worse, if you get what I mean. So, like, I've tried to take a vertical slice where I could.
What I've realized is that it's unsolvable. You can never, like, the point to go to roll queue, and this is where I'm at right now. I'm still open to changing my mind, but the point to
in
go
top 500, the queue time for 6v6 is longer. In open queue, yeah. I guess if it was in roll queue comp, I'd say that the new game mode had not nurtured its tank player base in the way that you do need to for the tank player base. I think you do need to let it settle down. I think there's a very good qualitative argument that it would settle down with more tank players and less tank players over time, if you get what I mean.
to roll lock specifically 2-2 was, hey, we want to ensure higher quality matches, consistently. But now I'm asking myself, like in 5v5 roll lock, it's like, okay, well, are these matches like actually that much higher quality for how much I'm waiting, right?
Wait. So you're saying maybe format isn't always the most important thing ever?
Yeah. There's a lot more to it. Turns out there's a lot of ingredients that go into the cake, baby. But so you know. I don't know, but I've started to get to the point where it's like, is it? And that might be because I'm not playing as seriously anymore, and I'm much more of a casual now than I am, die hard, and grind ranked every day.
Yeah, it's literally just Roadhog, everything. Roadhog and Zarya Diva are the only pain points. Avril's out here bitching about Winston Orisa, and I'm like, Winston Orisa, who cares? Like, that's fine. Like, you can win with Winston Orisa. It just sucks a bit because Orisa sucks as a hero, and somebody's playing Orisa in the game, right?
With just the gray hairs coming in. But I don't know. That's another alternative to think about. It's like, okay, well, what are you asking for, right? And I think a lot of those average ranked players, like a lot of the times, and even high rank, this is true for everybody. It might actually be a placebo. Like, what is your alternative? Is what you have to ask. And to me, like from what I've seen in the results, I can't say that it's like that much more worth. Like 8. Like the guys, did y'all see my quick play queue times when I got on try perks? I was in 12-minute quick play queues. I was in 12-minute consistent, like 12 plus. Like, I'm just like, yo, I actually I like this update. Like, I want to try and play it, but like ever since Overwatch 2 came out, I cannot play quick play. But that's a different.
What the chances of us getting a new off tank? I mean, probably not high because they're probably developing for Stadium more than anything else. Isn't Winston a hard meta in pro play? I don't know.
Tangent, I suppose.
So, I'll chime in. I think like the reason you have to contend with the fact that you need a seamless experience such that if a player moves through the ranks or improves the MMR, even if you don't play ranked, you talked about quick play there, your MMR still does matter. For better or worse, and your queue times will be impacted because you might
don't tell Marvel Rivals that.
high quick play MMR. This guy's quick play Warlord, by the way. He just says quick play
I
MMR
haven't played 2 years.
But the point I'm trying to make here is that like you can't have like, oh, it's roll queue for gold until diamond, and then it's suddenly open queue from like masters up. That wouldn't work either. So you have to pick one system. But then, okay, well, if queue times are a massive issue for the higher ranks, you're gonna have to go towards open queue. And the reason being that once players reach that level, you could also argue, by the way, your like high rank players are your most hardcore players, which I would be interested to know stat-wise if they will never release this for obvious reason. If there's a correlation between higher rank and purchasing more in the game because they're more hardcore and invested in the game, right? I don't know if there's a correlation there. There could be. I don't know.
Well, there's definitely a correlation between playtime and like there's going to be a correlation there. It depends if it's how strong the correlation is. Obviously, like more playtime's going to spend more. I doubt a player that spends significantly less playtime in lower ranks by default is going to, like, if it was similar playtime for a player in low rank and a player in high rank, that'd be an interesting one. I don't think it would bias it too much, to be honest. I think casual players are very much more flippant with their money than competitive players. I think competitive players are less likely to part with their money. I feel like they feel like they've already got value from the game. When you look at Routes money spent, just for everyone, I have never bought a skin. That's a lie. I got the Origin Edition when it first launched. That's a lie.
But you need to contend with the fact that like if a player actually moves through the rankings and improves in the game and eventually reaches a higher rank, the queue times are going to suffer. So what are you going to do about that? And open queue is kind of like the solution to that. Like you have to contend with the fact that open queue might just be required to make high ranks playable in that kind of way. So.
Spend more money on bits here than in game. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna head off. We got to the end. Fucking hell, they do yap a bit, don't they? Lessons from Rivals. I think we're probably gonna come back tomorrow and do lessons from Rivals because this seems like it's gonna get quite juicy. Maybe I'll maybe you know what? Let's just run out.
To answer SVD's original question, it's like is it? We're saying that it's both good and bad for the average player, but I think it is both good and bad for the average player. And those
I don't
things
think they said anything for the last half hour. I don't know if you guys are on the same end as me. Primal's been the only one keeping me awake.
Mutually exclusive. They're both true at the same time. Yes.
Yeah, it is the funny paradox. Here's another little nuance I'm going to add, and I want to throw it to Hawk, which is that
guys, we're so old. All this nuance. Holy crap.
Then another facet of what I think Sam, you mentioned that like you feel worse like queuing 10 minutes and then you're getting a game that you're like, this is a wash. Yeah. Overwatch has actually reduced its average game length, right? This is like a thing that's hard to remember consciously until you're like, oh wait, like they've been making effort to like make sure that each game is less time, which makes
I know.
Which makes open queue potentially more appealing, right? Because it's like those games where it's 4 DPS, they are less of your time. Like I'm thinking of I've been grinding a lot of Dota.
Is this proven, by the way? Is it proven that the games are?
I always find it funny that people are okay with 1 minute to do hero bans when they're not okay waiting 1 minute in queue. Like 1 minute extra on the queue is going to be awful, but yeah, we'll add hero bans in for the bronze players that really aren't doing anything with the hero bans, delaying them getting into the game by 1 minute. I actually do think it's quite a lot of traction on Rivals having to sit through the hero ban phase because I just AFK during it. I actually find it quite annoying.
What it now?
Well, they've made specific changes
compared to win. Like, are you
Flashpoint
talking
and
like,
Push are both shorter modes. Like than other modes, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, if you're talking like OG Overwatch, I mean, KOTH used to be 5 rounds. So like, give me a ballpark.
Yeah, like when they launched, like when we had the original.
I literally just don't care. By the way, I literally just don't care.
see if, well, do people just click on the left side mode? Will people just click 6v6 and they don't give a hell? They don't give a damn like whether or not they're playing it or not. And like, you know, are the queue time is an issue? Like I think that could be a good experiment. But I'm completely fine with open queue. I think we as a community and as like a hero shooter player, or even just like a team based competitive player, you're going to get games in these competitive games that are just unwinnable. And if they're not, if the trade-offs aren't there, like,
It's so funny that people that entirely agree, all of them, not a single dissenting opinion in the house, talk for 40 minutes on a topic that they all agree with, right? What are we talking about if we all agree with it? Who was on the point of open queue bad? Did anyone say that open queue was bad in here, or did they all give a couple of points that for the reasons open queue is not the best at some point, but that was it? Like, why is one of our things open queue versus roll queue if nobody disagrees with it? No, SCB should send the survey out for opinions on stuff. I like the ban system when only 2 heroes were busting rivals. Now I want to ban half the cast. You can't just always keep getting a bigger bucket, dude. Eventually they're going to have to actually fix their shit. Eventually. You can't just keep shoving off the work. I knew they'd do this the moment that it was announced. I fucking knew. The moment that you have a bucket, you put the heroes in a bucket and you forget about them because it doesn't matter anymore. Now they're all in the bucket and you've got more heroes here and the heroes need to go in the bucket, but your bucket's full. What are you going to do? You're going to struggle a bit. So yeah, just keep buying bigger bucket.